Good morning. I will turn it over. Today is Thursday, February the 15th, and this is the Architects Committee meeting. We will go ahead and get started.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm more than happy to read the notice on the website if you would like. This meeting, along with yesterday's engineering meeting, was noticed on the website for the architects and engineers. It was noticed on February the 7th, and I will go ahead and do a quick roll call. Chairman Rick Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Brian Tibbs.
Here.
Mr. Frank Wagster.
Here.
Thank you. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. On our agenda this morning, we have three items. The first item is our primary purpose today is to look at the applications. We have some applications that some people had questions on, and looking at what those qualifications are. The first applicant is Sarah Frances Page. Do I need to read the number in? I will. 105807. We are looking at her exam completed requirements and some potential conflicts with Ms. Page's degree. Ed?
If you find it, let me know where it is, too.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
What page is
Actually, it started off with page 1.
Oh, is that the
Yeah,
first
that's the first one. Yeah.
Okay.
When in doubt.
Oh, excuse me. If you guys could speak up a little bit, I think we're having some technical difficulties hearing you on the mics. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, thank you.
Very funny.
Well, I guess, just quickly looking at the new information that we've got, it's still conflicting. I mean, and I'm seeing a NAB approval of a Bachelor of Architecture program here. But I'm also seeing Drury University's description of their program, and they don't say they have a Bachelor of Architecture degree. And that's where the confusion that I've had comes from. When Miss Page sent her information in requesting to be registered, it was surprising to me that, first of all, I didn't know where Drury University was, so I looked it up on the website, and that's where I came up with, here's a description of our curriculum. And they didn't describe a Bachelor of Architecture. And the one that we've got here on the iPad says that. It's a 4-year degree. But then at the same time, I'm looking at new information from NAB that says it's a Bachelor of Architecture. And I'm still confused. Why the conflict? Does anybody talk to Drury University to see what they really have?
I think if we don't come to a good position, we can definitely contact them, send something in writing, and say, can you explain it? Maybe they haven't updated their information, and it is something recently approved, is all I can come up with. But it doesn't all line up the way you would need to approve, I believe.
Right. Now, I've got to admit, just looking at everything she's done, including take the exam, which she took it in Tennessee, from what I understand. Is that correct?
I don't have it in front of me.
I mean, it appears that, let me go to a page, where is it? In the actual application front page, there, maybe, anyway, somewhere there was a indication that this doesn't even show she took the exam here, unless I'm reading somebody else's. No, I'm reading the wrong one. The first page of her application, which is not on the iPad, I don't see. But anyway, it had that she passed the exam and a date, and it had Tennessee. And so that indicates to me that at some point we approved her taking the exam, which maybe I guess we did. And so, and she's got experience. The only question here is if you have a 4-year degree, it takes more experience. The experience requirements are lengthier.
7 years.
Well, I think it's 4
4.
for this.
Okay,
and
I'm sorry.
7 if
7,
you don't
yeah.
high school. or something.
Right.
But anyway, so, and that would be the question is, does she need more experience to actually apply for being registered? Everything I see, her, the references she's gotten look good to me, look better than most that I see. And so I'm really wanting to go ahead and do this, but I don't want to set a precedent of we're allowing people with a 4-year degree to bypass a certain amount of required experience.
Right.
I think if we can just get a clarification on this issue, and like Frank said, I don't want to go down the wrong path, let someone get licensed, and then what do we do? Do we go back and take it away from them? Or, I mean, I
No,
don't,
we would not. I
No.
think until we get the clarification that everyone is satisfied with, now that you've debated it, we can definitely follow up with the university from that perspective.
Okay.
And then we can make sure that we've reviewed it. Liz has had a chance to review the full application to make sure that it meets. But it sounds like if the experience isn't what it needs to be, that we would send a letter saying you're missing maybe a year of experience, whatever it is.
however
that's
many
short.
hours.
Hours.
Yeah, or a year, whatever it is.
Or we could check with Drury and they say, no, that's incorrect. Our website's incorrect.
Is incorrect. Yeah,
I don't know.
that would change it. So I think we would delay her until we get better clarification, check with the university, and then look at the experience and compare to our statute.
The only thing I just want to say too is what I think what you had said in the beginning is, but just to, for my whatever, and maybe go out to NAB because they are saying that it is accredited. So is it accredited now? I mean, so when it says accredited since 1991. So anyway,
Well,
I do agree. Let's get a confirmation because when does a 4-year equal a 5-year? But
Exactly. How come I missed that?
yeah.
But, and looking at her transcript, I only see 4 years of education. She had a pretty big chunk of AP, advanced placement, coming from high school taking college courses. But they were, the basics,
Generals.
English and, those
Well,
types.
and also in the description, when I looked at it, it said you could not apply to their 5-year master's program if you took that class. And there again, I'm real confused as to why you would have a 4-year program if you can't roll it into a 5-year, because it said do not pursue this but if you're going to pursue architecture. So it's really bizarre. So okay, so I think we're in agreement that we're just going to check on the validity of the accreditation. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The next one is the Jeremy Michael Pucciano, 106115. This applicant is requesting to take the ARE, and he has a non-accredited degree, a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Interior Design. I reviewed this, and let me see if I'm in here. I reviewed this application, and I did not approve it because he did not meet our education requirements. And I think he supplemented some additional information, as he said, at our discretion, that we could approve something different. So if it's discretionary, then we need to discuss it and just see if we can put it to bed. So
I gotta admit, I didn't read the entire thesis paper.
51 pages.
I did.
I reviewed it, but I didn't
Looked over
review.
Thoroughly, yes.
But that alone wouldn't persuade me to say that a degree in interior design is acceptable as a prerequisite to take the exam. I mean, he does have IDP hours,
Yeah.
but we allow you to take the exam early, so, you know, even if we did approve something like that, we'd have to say, well, okay, but you've got to take twice the number of hours, but we don't really have a basis with a degree in interior design to say you can take the ARE. So
I agree with you. I think what's confusing is so NCARB will, record, I guess, XP hours, even though you're not in a architecture program, and maybe you guys don't know the answer to that, but that was another confusing thing for me. I was like, well, they've got this verified experience report. So is that the case?
Each state has their own regulations, and ours is specific to that. And if they qualify in their state, then they can pretty much do NCARB and all that. But we're very specific as to what we require. And
So NCARB.
I mean, and I'm just using it since Kansas comes to mind. Kansas may allow them to do that. I don't know. I haven't, I'm licensed in Kansas, but I don't, because I'm an architect. But I don't know about that. But I just know that it does not meet our criteria.
Yeah.
So if does that require a motion and a roll call, or a motion? I would like to move that we not accept his request to take the exam.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Point of order here. We did not do a motion on the first one, Ms.
Correct.
Page.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, and Wanda will correct me because she's the expert on this, on each of the applications for the candidates, we will sign off and make sure that we have the information to provide them as well. So in this one, we're saying that they're not meeting the minimum requirements for education. We can, we're making notes on each of the applications. So
The first one, we're just seeking clarification.
correct. So we're temporarily delaying it until we have clarification. We'll bring it back in
And that might
April.
be resolved tomorrow.
Correct, it could be. And then electronically, we'll get them out. Our goal is
Yeah.
always to let them move on as quickly as possible. So if we can resolve this by Monday, you all will know and you'll see what we see and we can move on. This one, it sounds like everybody's in accord, so the motion's perfect.
Right. And thank you for getting that application, that Ms. Page's information quickly, because when I renew my licensure and then I'm applying for new licenses in different states, it can become very frustrating if they don't respond. And then we're not trying to keep anyone from practicing, so that, we want to be on
Correct.
top of it. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I think the last one is Mary Lynn Sachet. No application submitted. She has a question about experience from 5 or so years back and whether this would make her ineligible to take, and no application was submitted, the ARE. So I think it's just a question for the architects.
I guess is this, and again, I'm not sure I've seen, she hadn't submitted anything, but is the experience that she had from 5 years back certified through the ID or the AXP program? Or does she just say, I worked for a firm for 5 years? That part I don't know. But I would say if she has certified experience, then I don't know that there's a time period where you say, no good anymore.
I don't remember us having a time period, but NCARB has that rollover time frame, and if she's recorded her time with NCARB,
Well, I think that's for taking the
Yeah,
exam.
that's for tests. So I think the
But
experience.
you can't, for taking the exam, you can't continue,
oh, that's right, okay.
Yeah, there's
taking
a
it.
clock for the exam.
No,
but
that's it,
roll-
rolling clock.
experience
Sorry.
is experience.
Yeah. Well, if she's got it documented, I don't know why we wouldn't accept it.
Oh,
See the attachments in there. There is something from NCARB that shows that she has finished the IDP, and I've even attached the record of it.
okay, I do
And
see
her
that.
first email in
Well
that
down
group
there.
should
80,
cover
87,
question in more detail.
86, 85.
Second sheet even has Mr. Thompson's response. First sentence made me take a moment.
What page was my opinion on?
It's on 80.
80?
80?
Okay,
If that takes a motion, I move we
right, thank you.
advise her that go ahead and send your application in.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
And I added one in paper form from, it's YODER.
Anna Yoder.
Hers was just a question also.
I think the first question on here about deemed substantially equivalent to a NAB accredited degree, that's not, we can't answer that question unless someone outside of this board has to get NAB to advise us to that. From our history of doing this, or am I incorrect?
I don't think so. I was recently brought to my attention there is a whole nother program that would have to happen to make sure that it's an equal program. So yes, I agree. It's not something that we can decide.
I don't know. I remember, excuse me, quite a while back, the NAB issue came up, and I don't know if there is a fee involved for them to do the research.
I think it is.
I think so,
Yeah.
but that's really all I remember about how NAB approaches their substantial equivalent evaluation. So. And she is aware of the 5 year of experience to apply for licensure.
One of the NAB information that you've given us only pertains to their master's programs.
Yeah.
I see 3 Master of Architecture degrees.
Looking back at page, I didn't give you anything on Yoder because it just
This
came
was
in. I think,
attached
yes.
to it. Maybe I'm reading the wrong one.
It's Washington University. Is that where she's from?
Oh, it
Yeah,
says
that's where she's
Washington
from.
University.
Yeah, it looks like it's the same.
I guess it, okay.
But Frank's right. It does have the master's program.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if that 4 year program, how that relates to the master's. It's kind of like the one previously where not like that, where they could not attend the master's program regardless if they had the 4 year degree, but we don't know about this. It would seem it's typical that you go from a 4 into a master's program, but
Well, I guess the question that I'm seeing asked here says, how can I determine if the program she attended is, quote, deemed substantially equivalent to a NAB accredited degree? And it's not. It's non-NAB accredited. And it's a 4 year program, which is a not a professional degree.
She even says it in the beginning. It could be just well, I don't want to necessarily give her a recommendation. But she could go out to the school. Probably they would be maybe a first good spot. But anyway, I don't think we can't make that.
NCARB would advise her on what the experience requirements are.
We have in the past, if someone was enrolled in the master's program and they didn't complete the program, they did 4 of the 5 years, then that was an acceptable program, but they had to have more practical experience before, which is in the law and rules. So, but this, I don't know what to tell her if it's not. It doesn't seem like it is accredited.
Well, my answer would be it's not deemed substantially equivalent.
Unless NAB could advise us that it is. Well, yeah.
I don't think it is because they hadn't certified it.
Right. Well, from this, the answer is no. But
Right.
if she wants to pursue that on her own, that would be up to her.
But you can. We do allow somebody with a 4-year degree
Yeah.
to become licensed, but they need additional experience.
Correct. Yeah. Accredited program. Right.
So on her, if I could, for clarification, we would be, and we haven't done a motion yet, but just as I'm taking my notes, we would be able to let them know that based on your evaluation of the application, she does not substantially meet the requirements as stated unless she can get information to us from NAB explaining that they are accredited and that this does follow the normal accreditation process.
Yes, that's.
I am right, okay.
Thank you for summarizing that.
I
for
needed
us.
it in my brain.
Well, I was going to ask if someone could summarize that since we're all over the board there a little bit. So, thank you. Did we vote on a motion on that?
Do we need to motion?
I think at this point, we would need to vote probably to deny, but if she finds that NAB gives us something, then obviously we can represent. But if she doesn't substantially meet the requirements, then in essence, that application, at least for now, is not accepted. Now, I don't know, has she actually applied or is she just asking us the question?
She's just asking.
Okay, so in that case, no, we will answer and guide her and see what she comes back with.
Because it states no application submitted. so-
Okay,
all
sounds
right.
great.
All right, so we're just going to advise her.
Okay.
We need a motion on that or not?
She said no.
No, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Welcome.
Let's see. Do we have other new business to discuss? Do we have any outstanding applications, Wanda, that we need to take a look at today? Okay, all right.
We do have one issue from Liz, I think, where there's a definition of.
Yeah, I was going to make an announcement about that. The engineering committee, so we put that on the agenda for the full board to discuss together. The engineering committee did start the discussion yesterday, though, and they feel and I'll let Mr. Bursai speak to this during the full board meeting as well, but they feel as if they're not ready to discuss what has been presented in the packet. They're not comfortable with the language, and they don't want to move forward until we thought that a joint committee meeting between the architects and engineers where they could fully discuss the idea of even having a definition of practice and then what that would look like before the next meeting, like a separate committee day for that.
Looked like their definition was becoming a book. And I guess, and I'm sure they discussed it, but it also looked like, there's a PE, but there's also HVAC, a mechanic, the plumbing guy, and then they named all these engineers. But that's not all the same people. and they're including everybody. They're including, from what I can see, a civil engineer can do all the plumbing he wants to. Or, and I'm just throwing out an opinion here, but it
I
looks like
understand.
it's.
Well, the language was taken from a couple different states' language that the board had previously discussed that they liked. But it seems the consensus now is that they don't like the language. I'll let Mr. Bursai speak to this again, but I think what's going to happen is it appears that we might, excuse me, my allergies. It appears that we might remove that from the agenda today and have a separate joint committee meeting before the next board meeting so that we have dedicated time to just discuss that topic with everybody in the room that would be a party to that. Because the concern is moving forward, we can't really move forward with just a definition of architecture if we don't have also a definition of engineering. So if the architect committee is agreeable to that, it seems like that is the direction the engineering committee wanted to go. But that, it's up to you guys as well.
Objections?
No objections. Agree.
Yeah, we agree.
We'll do that for the April meeting, make sure that we can be together. Yes. Anything else? New business?
Just a question, Liz. The reason we want to define ourselves is more for the legal benefit. Is that correct? So if an issue comes up and there's a question that somebody's practicing architecture or engineering without a license, that there's a clear definition of. Is that the reason for
I'd
this?
have to go back and listen to your previous meetings to determine what the specific consensus was, but from what I remember, there was a broad discussion about how most all of the other states had a definition and Tennessee does not. So it seemed like the board was moving towards wanting one, but now it seems like you might not, which is either way is fine, but I think that's why we need to have a separate dedicated discussion to the pros and cons of having one, which we have discussed at previous meetings, and I'm not prepared to go over right now. And then if we move in the direction of having one, what the language would look like.
I guess my question would be, this is coming from other states or similar to other states, let's say, then could we talk to the other states and say, you have a definition, has this created a problem, or, that type thing? Somebody that's had experience defining themselves, so to speak.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your question is.
The states that have definitions, have they experienced problems with this definition?
That would be a big research undertaking.
I've had conversations.
Sure, we could look into that.
In NCARB meetings with states that have that, and they tell me that it's very helpful because of cross practice. This is what architecture is. It's not a vague thing where if an engineer wants to do some architectural work, then it's very specific and clear that he can and cannot do certain things. And I believe that's the biggest help to them from what I've been told. So anyway,
Yeah, and I think part of it is a lot of the boards in NCARB that we meet with are architectural only. They don't have engineers, and so they don't have the engineers.
Right. They are divided a lot of times.
To where
So they've
that-
only got their opinion and not the opinion
they
of the
don't have a
engineers.
good board like we do. That's all. Or it's good a board. Let me
There you go.
rephrase that.
There you
back.
go. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I think certainly if the discussion in April leads to that, then we would do a thorough, research of the pros and cons, how this affects other states. I do think, though, with that many states that have them in place and haven't taken them out of their laws and rules, that it's probably more positive than negative. But that's just my initial opinion.
Any other business we need to discuss? No business?
Not that I know of. No other business.
Move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye. Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to read the introduction here. The notice of the February 14th and 15th 2018 meeting of the Board of Architecture and Engineering Examiners was posted to the Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners website on February the 7th, 2018. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll have a roll call, please.
Susan Ballard,
Here.
Robert Campbell,
Present.
Ricky Bersai,
Here.
Blair Parker,
Here.
Brian Tibbs,
Here.
Rick Thompson,
Here.
Frank Wagster,
Here.
Kathy Ware,
Here.
Alton Heathcote,
Present. Happy to be so.
Stephen King.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Hey, well, we're certainly glad Alan's here. Alton is here. I notice we have a few guests in the audience. If you would, please stand up and let us know who you are and who you represent.
Casey Anderson, I'm the Executive Director of the American Council of Engineering Companies in Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers.
Thank you. Not sure we have any new announcements unless somebody has some they would like to make. Seeing none, I noticed on the agenda Robert's Rules of Order is mentioned there. Is that for a reason?
Yes, it is. This is our first meeting of the year, and so at the beginning of each year, we go ahead and need to vote on following Robert's Rules of Order in how we conduct business. So if you have any questions on how that follows, Liz is more than happy to explain. Otherwise, we would need to make a motion to follow our meetings by the standard Robert's Rules of Order.
And there should be a copy of those in your board member handbooks that you received when you were initially
Sure, everybody has a copy of that. And having gone over it, do I hear a motion that we follow the Robert's Rules of Order?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion.
Oh,
And
Mr. Campbell has a.
I mean, after we've got a second, that's cool. I got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
What is the violation or the downside if we don't follow Robert's Rules of Order? Because I'm fairly confident we won't in every case, and I'm not willing to vote on something that I know I'm going to put myself in prison for. So, Robert's Rules of Order is, on its surface, sounds really cool and everything's good, but there's a manual about that thick on Robert's Rules of Order, and I'm confident that I don't know all that. So
I don't think the board is binding themselves to getting in trouble. I think it's more of like a mutual agreement that you'll strive to follow that guideline to conduct business in a smooth manner.
as long as if friendly amendment, as long as we say we will strive to do that, not.
As far as motions and any board action that needs to be official, legal, and Roxana, as the director right now, will always stop you and make sure you're doing that correctly.
If you would like, we could designate you Sergeant at Arms, and you could.
Well, again, I've been in a lot of things, and we all talk about Robert's Rules of Order, and one of the things that always gets screwed up is the call to question. Somebody says, I called a question, and everybody goes, oh, well, okay, that means we're going to start voting. No, you're supposed to have a vote to do that. And I just don't want to bind myself to something that I'm fairly confident we're going to mess up on at some point.
I'm fairly confident you're going to screw it up, too.
I know I will. I know I will. So, anyway, I'll go ahead.
That discussion being in the minutes, I'm sure we'll be able.
Okay, good.
Yeah. We have a motion and second. Do we have any other discussion? There being no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And everybody should have a a copy of the minutes from the December meeting. If you've had a chance to read over that, I would.
Motion to approve.
Have a second to read it just one more time.
Hey,
Frank, since I wasn't here, I can't tell you if they're correct or not, so I'm going to recuse myself.
so far I've heard a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second, then I want to have some discussion, please.
Okay.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, and I'm trying to find my minutes because I made my notes. Where are you, minute? All right, I'll try to do this from memory. So my question is on the minutes. Okay, good. Here we are. Thank you. There was a discussion that we had from Ms. Martin last meeting. It's under Policy Director Address. There is no language in there that discusses or states that there were questions asked or there was other dialogue that was entertained on that. And if this is going to be the official record of our meeting, I think we ought to make the minutes, and I don't expect every comment to be in here. That's not my intent, but I think there should be some notation that there was some discussion and some disagreement from the board on that direction to make it an accurate depiction of what happened during the meeting. So that's my comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rick.
And in the legal case descriptions that were in the minutes in case number 7, that's on page 9 and 10, there, in the mitigating factors on page 10, there are a couple of places where the word complainant was used, and I'm pretty sure it was intended to be respondent. So, and I think I gave that to Liz yesterday, and so.
Thank you. Also on the legal agenda, item number, there we go. This was case number 201-707-0401. I recused myself for this vote, and it's not shown, so I would like that. Yes, it's number 6 in what you provided here. It's the case number is 201-707-0401. Also, looking towards the end of the meeting minutes, we were included a copy of the proposed rule changes, and yet we did not go through those rule changes. Unless I stapled something incorrectly here.
Last meeting, we didn't go through the rule changes? Or are we talking about what's on our agenda to go over rule changes for this time,
In the December meeting.
in the December meeting? I think we did, and Liz was going to follow up with things for this meeting as well. Is there anyone in particular that we listed, we discussed, and we don't think we did?
No.
Okay.
No, I just want to make sure that the meeting minutes reflect what
We
what
did.
the conversation was and what we did.
Okay. And of course, and everyone's aware, we not only stream live, but our official video of the meeting is the full record if anyone ever needs anything. So to avoid maybe too many details or the meeting minutes being so cumbersome that no one would look at it, we do sort of not necessarily summarize, but get the big picture items. But I agree completely. Page 13, that would include the policy review piece from Laura. We will add that there was conversation and disagreement, as Mr. Campbell suggested, and then the 2 changes to the legal report. And I will also look at the video just to make sure that all of the rules were discussed and are part of this.
Okay, Mr. Campbell?
So I understand the tape is also considered
It is the official
the official.
yes, video.
Do we have? Is there a document retention policy and a backup policy on all that the state has to keep from some accidental? Because again, I've been in business. We've archived stuff. We've put it on CDs. We've got it off site. We do all that great stuff, and somehow mysteriously, job number 13072 we can't find. Okay, and I mean, this is not. I just know how fallible electronic records can be sometimes, because when you're archiving a lot of data, everybody goes, "Oh, that's just seamless," and it's not just seamless. And I didn't know if there was a policy out there that help that situation.
So to the best of our ability, like you would in your business, yes, that we've got actually backup for our systems, both for what's on the video. They're backed up on YouTube, which of course that's a different world, but we back up as well to the best that we can. So yes, so hopefully that'll always be able to keep up with technology as well. Thank you.
Any other comments on the minutes? And I know we had a motion. Did we ever get a second on that?
I seconded, but I think it's probably maybe appropriate to have the changes in front before we vote. If
Okay.
I'm looking to legal, before we can vote on the minutes, we would probably need to see what any revisions are on those.
I think we can go either way. If we wait until April, we wouldn't post them on the website until they're finalized and reviewed in April. If we consider them administrative changes, then we can post them up there. On occasion, we will post minutes and not catch a word or a typo or anything of that nature, and we can always then replace for that type of thing, obviously. But these changes, I think because they're in the video, it's at your discretion. If you prefer viewing them in April, we'll put it off. If you're okay with motioning it with the two situations regarding the two cases and added statement on page 13 and vote it that way, it's totally at your discretion.
I think I'm going to rescind my second, please, sir.
Okay.
A motion, do we have a second? And
Already motion. I don't think I can
then the
second.
motion dies from lack of a second. We move on. We'll review it in the next meeting. And since we're on the agenda, is
Ed, I'm sorry. So we're not voting on approving the minutes, or?
correct?
Oh, okay.
We had a motion but not a second?
That's
Am I
right.
Well, could I?
Yes.
I misunderstood, Frank, because I feel like that with I can't. We're really killing these minutes, but with the fact that it's brought up here, so it's on the record here, and it's on the video, what really happened. I feel like we could approve the minutes just administratively myself instead of having to go back 4 months, when April shows up. So I don't know where that fits into the. Probably messing up the Robert rules already, but where does that fit in? I feel like we ought to be able to approve the minutes. We've more than recorded the issues.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have another person that agreed
Oh, yeah,
enough
you're
to
right.
have a second.
That's right. Nobody seconded it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not real good at this Robert's Rules of Order, so can we have discussion without a second? Or if there is no second, we just move on?
No, you can discuss it. If there's
You
a
can
second
discuss.
now, I would make sure to reflect who motioned and who seconded it, and we can go on.
I had a motion approved, but nobody seconded it.
So we move on?
Motion died from lack
Thank
of a second, yes. And since we're on the agenda, does anybody have any changes they would like to make to the agenda before we move on? Rick?
Yes, the item under legal, architecture, and engineer definition revisions update, we discussed that in the engineer committee meeting yesterday and would like to delete that from the agenda and would recommend a joint meeting between the architecture committee and the engineering committee.
Okay, would you put that in form
I would like to make a motion to delete the architecture and engineer definition discussion from the agenda.
Is that coming from the engineering committee?
That is coming from the engineering committee.
So it doesn't require a second.
Okay. We have a motion from the engineering committee that I'm going to use the word postpone from your motion, discussing the architecture and engineering definition revisions, and from what I understand, have a joint meeting between the architects and the engineers, try to hash this out possibly at the next meeting or before the next meeting.
Correct.
Okay. All right. We have a motion from the engineering committee. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Could I have a question? In this meeting, I don't want to get into it too much today since we're not having the discussion, but part of my question and concern about a joint meeting, is that I don't think that as an architect, I want to try to define everything that you have so far in your litany of what engineers are. I think if we can come to an agreement as to what that format might be, and some limitations, because architects, we don't have as many disciplines as you do, and not that it's not important to talk through it, but I really would caution everybody about meeting for 2 or 3 hours to hammer out what a civil engineer is versus what a structural engineer is versus all your disciplines, whereas we have architects, and I think we have a pretty clear grasp of what we do. Not that you don't, but I just want to be cautious about having one of these long, drawn-out meetings. That, not that it's not worthy, but that's really an engineering issue. It's what you do and not necessarily what I do. I have some opinions as to what certain engineers may or may not be able to do, but all those disciplines, that's in your wheelhouse, not mine.
Rick, I think we're on the same page. I believe that our discussion was relative to that our definition was way too lengthy in some of the things that it went about. Also, I believe that we believe that it opened both of us up for some more unhealthy disagreement on the overlapping issues, and we want to make sure that we get that part of it, as well as maybe narrowing our definition or our ideas down. So we were complimentary of the way you had yours, but at the same time there were some questions on overlap that I think it would be worthwhile for us to sit face to face and just kind of make sure we've got some of that worked out, so that we're not every meeting somebody's coming to us and saying, oh, you violated this little piece, and we're having to adjudicate that all over the place. So I think we're on the same page.
Okay. Yeah, that's just this cross practice thing is not clear, and that's really my only concern.
That's
right.
where we're
Okay.
generally coming from.
Sorry, Kathy.
If any of the, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add to it, so just so that you know that definition that you saw, is that what you're referring? You saw the one that was in the engineering committee discussion. That didn't come from us. That's not our first offering. Just so you know, that was just something that we asked Liz to kind of look at a few other states, and she blended some things together for discussion purposes. But that's not our starting point. So I just want to make sure you don't think that.
Thank you.
Is that helpful? Okay, good.
Our starting point was to make sure there was no such thing as an architect in the state of Tennessee.
Bad move.
And if any of the board members would like, since I did send you that document, it's in your email, and I'll also pass around a paper copy for those who have not received it yet. If you'd like to individually, before the next meeting and before the joint committee meeting, send me any suggested language that you'd like me to look at or make edits to that you would like to present to everyone during that joint committee meeting, please feel free to do so.
One other comment: the committee expressed even the bigger question of, are we sure we want definitions in the laws and rules? So that's a question we can't really ask and deal with without, I think, dealing with architects on it. So I just don't think we've ever done that outside of this meeting where we can fully explore that question and understand why we haven't had one and why we need one.
Well, I think I've expressed. Oh, sorry, Stephen. Well, I think I've expressed this in previous meetings. I believe the architects would like to have that definition, and it's not that we don't, and we would like to work toward doing that. And I guess my question to legal is, can we have a definition if the engineers cannot agree on having one? I mean,
That'll
the
be
statement was
something
made
that-
earlier that we both had to have a definition.
Right. And the engineering committee did pose that same question, and that is something that I've written down to research before the next meeting.
Okay, good. Just trying to get some basic things established before we get together. Okay, thank you.
Stephen?
I was wondering if I could ask Liz, you said you pieced together the definition of engineering from several different sources. Would it be
For sources that the board agreed that you all liked the language from these states.
I would like to see, if it's possible, that in the Word document where each thing came from to review. Would that be possible?
Yeah, that's fine. I can send I have a document that has every state on it that this board has already seen. I can send that out again.
I would like to see a merged document where you pulled different.
Well, I don't have that.
don't have
like,
that?
I don't have a document where I highlighted, okay, this line is going here and this line is going here. That's not how I formed these definitions. But I'm happy to.
Well, I'm just looking
reproduce-
to see which pieces came from NCAAS, which pieces came from Alabama and other states that we've mentioned.
Okay.
So if
Well-
there's an easy way to do that, I'd like to see it, if that's possible.
I can reproduce the language from the two states that the board agreed
Okay.
that they wanted the language to be
Okay.
modeled after, and I can also give you the language from all of the other states so you can compare
Okay.
and contrast. But I do not have a document
Okay.
that highlights which line was.
And you
pulled
can
from
email that
what.
to us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Larry?
While we are a great minority in the overall numbers as landscape architects, I think it's important for us to be a part of these discussions as well. So I would ask that we be included in these discussions.
Any other discussion on the agenda? There being none, I notice Carter Lawrence has come in. If you got any contribution you would like to make, or
Not to that component. I'm actually not sure what you were talking about. But first wanted to say hello to everyone. I noticed that two of our members are still feeling festive from Valentine's Day and wearing red, so
Would you like your piece of chocolate?
I'll come grab one
Okay.
before I leave. Thank you. Oh, Roxanne actually shared one with me, so thank you. I was coming down to first say hello, and secondly, it had been discussed in the previous meeting that we're going to have a fee reduction conversation with you, and understand actually that Roxanne had shared some documentation that we'd provided in preparation for the discussion. However, I wanted to apologize that need to delay that discussion because of some ongoing discussions with department leadership related to some cost savings that are in the works related to the AWS initiative, of which I know you are all aware. So because of that, I wanted to see if it would be okay. Come back in 2 months for a discussion to carry on about, or 2 months at the next board meeting to carry on with the discussion related to the financial piece, the fee reductions. So that's what I was coming down to talk about with, to mention and apologize to you about today.
that topic apparently has brought up a couple of topics of discussion. Susan?
Carter, thank you for bringing this up. I have a couple of other items I'd like for y'all to consider in fee reductions. Can I mention those now? Okay.
Absolutely.
Two of the suggestions I have is, one, our educators who don't practice for the most part because they're teaching all the time. They want to be registered, but it's, it's another fee outside of their educator's fee and this fee and that fee. So if you could put those on the list to have a significant fee reduction, maybe 50%, and this is just my opinion, it's not been voted on by the board, obviously. The other one would be our registrants that are over 65. Ask that they have a fee reduction as well, and what percentage would need to be determined, obviously, again, by the board. We've already looked at students, which I think is important, not to have an application fee for them. And so those are my two suggestions. Okay.
We'll absolutely take a look at those.
Okay.
Robert, I noticed you.
Yeah, and thank you for what Mr. Huddleston did and others, I'm sure, that worked with this. Along those same lines, maybe just a few more scenario type things. What if we went from 125 to 110? I mean, let's go to the next work because we're at positive 114 right now. Let's see what it takes maybe to go to a break-even condition, and maybe even put in one of the scenarios where we are able to increase the grants to the next level too, just to see. And again, I appreciate what's been done because it really gives us a much clearer picture of the overall look, but maybe take it just a little bit further and see where we may go a little further down the road if we want to kind of have a stretch goal, if you will. So if you can throw those in the next time, I think.
Yeah,
that would
absolutely.
be
And just so you know, I think we talked about this in the last one, that we generally try to avoid taking too big of a bite out of the apple, preferring instead to take smaller bites so that we don't find ourselves hat in hand up in front of GovOps saying, oops, we cut fees too much, ran a deficit, we need to raise. Because as you're aware, the General Assembly hasn't looked too fondly on fee increases for a while. So what we have tried to do and what we will do is look to maximize the fee reductions without going too far. So that, for example, we do a fee reduction in another 6 months, you think, hey, we could cut it further, that we come back and do that again rather than going too far. But we can, I certainly will, Bill and I will take a look at those and see if there's maybe a little bit more.
And I just think, see how how close we can to
Yeah.
zero, just to see what that looks like. I'm not saying that I'm all in on that or anything.
Sure.
I just think it's good to see that next step as well.
Absolutely.
And see where it takes us.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, and I have one comment is I would really like to see any kind of out-of-state not be reduced. And the reason I say that is, I mean, we've got local tax, the taxpayers or the citizens of Tennessee should get some kind of benefit from being Tennessee as opposed to being out of state.
Right. From a legal standpoint, we would be best treating them equally so that we don't potentially end up in trouble. So I hear you about making sure that we're taking care of Tennesseans, but we need to be wary of discriminating against out-of-state registrants.
I'm registered in 9 other states besides Tennessee, and they definitely discriminate against me in all of those. As far as out-of-state versus in-state, I mean, so it's not
right.
It's not like doing that would set a precedence in any way.
And Mr. Thompson actually, I think, shared about Oregon, where he had an absurdly high out-of-state fee. So I'm aware of other states not doing it right. Just talking about from a legal protection of this board and your actions, that it would be best to avoid disparate treatment of out-of-state registrants. But what we will do is look for the cost savings in the categories where we can to make those fee reductions, and we'll certainly take that in mind.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on to professional societies. Do you have reports? Oh. No.
I was just thinking for the chocolate.
Yeah, okay. Thought you were.
Thank you. I'll get it.
Thought you had a report. Okay, thank you, Nathan. All right. Thought you had a prepared speech.
Exactly. This isn't going to be the State of the Union. But Liz tries to make me look better. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, I'm Nathan Ridley. I'm here on behalf of the landscape architects. Ms. Anderson and I did rock, paper, scissors in the interest of time, and I lost, so I'll speak on behalf. And we also have a couple of absences today. Ashley, for the architects, is out of town for this meeting and regrets her absence. And Mr. Baltimore, on behalf, I think he's being a nurse today for his bride is doing physical therapy. So if I talk long enough, I might give him time to get here, but we'll try to cover the waterfront from our legislative friends. And I promise to be bright, brief, and gone. Our legislative friends are fully engaged. The session started on January the 9th. Bill filing deadline was February the 1st, so you sort of have the universe of problems that'll be before the General Assembly this time. It ranges, just like it always does, from everything from public records to guns. We had a big gun conversation yesterday. One of the opening sessions of the legislature, the comptroller has an Office of Open Records Counsel, and they spoke at length about the open records law. It's fascinating. There are like 600 exceptions. But y'all remember the rule for open records, a Post-it note is a public record unless it's made confidential by law. So every record is a public record unless it's made confidential by law. So that's sort of the ground rules. And then you think about that and you think, wow, I do some work for Nashville Electric Service. You probably don't want their security plans to be a public record. So that's an example of after post 9/11/2001 of an exception to the public records law. And there are several of those sprinkled throughout the code. But not to go too far down that road. Probably the two dominant factors for this legislation. One is y'all's handiwork. Our legislative friends have a brand spanking new renovated building, the Cordell Hull building, just up the street. It's a spectacular Art Deco design. It has a host of marble and terrazzo in it that they kept during the renovation that you wouldn't be able to use because of the price with present construction prices. It's different. It's big. There are three features I think you should be proud of as professionals. There's a patio on the 8th floor that is open air that is quite nice, and as the weather gets better, they will enjoy that. It's not great big, but it's fun. The committee rooms are spectacular. As an old lawyer, it looks like federal court, floor to ceiling wood paneling. Looks like something important happens there. And y'all have heard me say before that the legislature works, the legislature and committee. And then there's a tunnel that connects the Cordell Hull building to the state capitol and the elevators that y'all are familiar with. And as you walk through it, you have no idea that you're 150 feet underground. The shadow box light, I'm probably using the wrong term, but the lighting and the arch ceiling for the tunnel, it's just open and airy, and you because they purposefully, some folks in the old Watlow tunnel, you felt like you were in the Twilight Zone because it's just a rectangular box of marble, and some of my clients would get the shakes walking through there, and that's not the case with the new one. I would encourage you to visit the facility. Each member has an individual office now. You have to be more intentional about your visits. Before, you could just walk through Legislative Plaza and selfishly, I could see most everybody in a day. Now you have to be a little more intentional about your appointments. Each member has an individual office, and they all have windows. I know my architectural friends talk about the power of light, and I think it puts them in a better mood. The other factor, the building is number one. Number two is 2018 is a huge election year. We'll get a new deck of cards. The Governor Haslam can't succeed himself, so there are 4 candidates. Y'all Republican side, 2 Democrats seeking the nomination in the August primary. Always do. It's sort of you got to go vote. Tennesseans don't vote. We're the worst. We're even worse than Alabama and Mississippi. It's not, I know y'all vote, but encourage your colleagues, your family members to vote. It makes us better. And then we have something here on the local level, I think in Nashville, that might set a tone. And there's some counties that have a May primary for their local offices. I call them the courthouse crowd. You might have some special elections for judges, but county clerks, trustees, folks like that. And in Nashville and metropolitan Davidson County, we're going to have a referendum on transit funding. There's a soup of taxes to fund mass transit improvements, and I think it'll be telling not just for Nashville but for all the surrounding counties whether or not that passes and kind of how we're going to go forward from there. I think that might. Questions. Always grateful for the opportunity, the privileges of addressing y'all, and happy to respond to your questions.
I have any questions?
My work here is done. Thank you again for the opportunity.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Represented everyone in.
It is representing the
Yeah.
four industry.
Okay, thank you. We will move on. Legal. Let's move on to the legal report, please. Sarah.
Good morning, members of the board. We have a legal report today, and all the cases are actually mine this time, so we won't be splitting duties with Shalina Brown. And I think we've slowly, as you know, we are transitioning to having one disciplinary counsel for this board, and I think we are about there. Shalina will still be doing any litigation that she has with you, but I think as far as complaints go, they're pretty much going to be with me going forward. So that might be a small change you notice, but you may see her in the future for more formal hearings and things like that. So Shalina will be around, and she still serves as our supervisor as well, so she'll be around here. Starting with the first case today, 2017-07-1171. Oh, sorry.
What page on our pads would that be? Do you know?
30.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Case we have here, it relates to a professional engineer whose license has lapsed. This complaint came to us from a consumer that was engaged with the engineer's company in order to receive fabricated parts. It's kind of going to the second paragraph to give you scope. The work for this project was design, fabrication, and installation of 2 fire water tanks and 2 fire pump houses for a project in another state, in West Virginia, actually. The structural design was subcontracted to a licensed engineer in that state, and the respondent did the layout of the fire pump equipment and piping based on provided specifications, and respondent's company fabricated the equipment. Respondent's company is a licensed contractor in West Virginia, and the licensed entities who installed the products. However, in this complaint, it actually wasn't related to the plans at all. There was no complaints on the plans, and they are not subject under our statute to requirement of sealing. However, the consumer in this case requested a letter certifying the work that this company had done, and asked that the engineer use his seal to make it official for the state of West Virginia. And so this engineer knowingly used his seal despite that it had been expired at that time for 6 years. I did send out an inspector just to make sure that we didn't have any additional plans sealed or anything like that, and the respondent did not have any plans. No plans had been sealed by him with his seal. It was this letter only that we were able to locate. He did admit knowing that the seal was expired, and rather than trying to explain this to the consumer, chose to do so, and expressed his apologies. As a result of this, I recommended a penalty for $500 for utilizing an expired seal to seal a letter, and that this time the respondent is renewing his engineering registration, so that in the future, if something like this were to happen, he's going to be maintaining active registration.
Okay, we have a recommendation from legal. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And now we'll have discussion. Alton?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, in the past, in situations like this, particularly with seal violations, we've also added that the respondent would take and pass the laws and rules exam.
You are correct. I think I might have left that off, and I think we should definitely add that back on, especially in honor of Philip Lim. So we need to make sure that that is included.
I was going to say, I had it written down here. Same thing.
I think that that's a friendly amendment that we may want to add on many of these.
So do we need to amend our motion?
I would recommend that you do so if you would
Okay.
like to. Mm-hmm.
Rick, you made the motion. Would you like to amend it to include the laws and rules?
I would like to make a motion to include the law and rules exam and passing it.
Second?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Robert?
Yeah, and I don't know if we formalized this or did not. Did we talk about having, especially on a seal violation, maybe a board member reviewing that too to see if that was okay? Or because this seems to be a little, I mean, again, when somebody seals something, even though they may be under the industrial exemption, that could be a fairly serious thing. I mean, that part, and I don't know what part this part played, but it could be a pretty intricate part of the design or what was going on. And
The seal wasn't on any plans. It was on a letter that was addressed to the Codes Department of West Virginia, just indicating that they are the company that produced the plans in West Virginia. So it was a one-paragraph cover letter sent and the request to the consumer independent of plans. So in this case, there wasn't a question of competency or whether the seal should or should not be on a particular product, but rather just the straight-up use of the seal in a way to represent to another state that this person was a registrant in Tennessee. Typically, I'm going to send complaints to board members when I'm looking for technical expertise of competency. We are very fortunate that we have a very fleshed-out definition of what requires a seal in our statute. It's very specific with square footage and level design. Obviously, if I'm unsure, I send those out. But typically, in those cases, it's pretty clear on the face of our statute when something needs to be sealed or not. And additionally, we have a fabrication policy that goes into detail on when and when not a seal is required for a fabrication product. But considering in this one, I didn't even have plans. It was just a letter sent in order to appease a codes official in West Virginia. It was more purely the use of the stamp at issue. So that's why that one was not sent for review.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Stephen?
Well, I'm still a little curious about, and this is why I'm interested in a reviewer, but maybe Ricky could elaborate on why something like it says the scope of the work was for the design, fabrication, and installation of 2 fire water tanks, 2 fire pump houses. Why did that not require a seal?
Just to clarify, this work was it's in West Virginia. We don't have jurisdiction over this issue. So the plans, whether or not they need to be sealed in West Virginia, is totally outside the scope of what we would look at. So the only violation here is a Tennessee registrant using an expired seal. So whether West Virginia or we require the plans is not subject to this particular complaint. And so, again, if I had plans and it was produced for Tennessee, this would have gone to a board member. The minute I open a file and see a plan, I send it to a board member because I have no idea what any of that means, just to be frank. And I make a joke to Robert that I feel like I'm getting a little dangerous when it comes to foundation reviews, and I'm starting to think I know more than I do. And so now I'm making extra particular about sending those out. But just to be clear, this is not a registrant that was doing work in Tennessee, but rather using their seal in another state. But Ricky, I think that would be enlightening if you wanted to, but I know we don't have plans for you to look at.
Right. I think if it was just a fire pump itself, I don't think that would need a stamp. But in our rules, I think the selection of a fire pump and the system that goes with it, a tank, would need a professional engineer's stamp, I believe.
Well, if I read the mitigating factors correctly, the work that why he put the stamp on there, I don't know, but it didn't even require a stamp or seal on the letter in the first place.
That's correct. It was the letter, the codes department wasn't asking for it to be a sealed engineer. The consumer said it would make us feel more comfortable. It's a company. They're a little more complex. We're not talking about an individual here. We're talking about an entity. They wanted that seal, especially because they are dealing with a licensed entity in their home state where they're located, and that's what they're used to seeing. That's what was produced by the people who were actually doing installation there, and they requested that seal. The respondent here admits it was wrong, and he did it just to appease this consumer and be done with the project. I think this was the last step, and he did it, and he knows it was wrong. So, in the future, if you'd like these to be sent to board members, I can definitely do that. There really isn't a question in this case that requires an expert opinion.
I'll make one quick comment, and this is just off the thing, because I'm trying to make Rick as mad as I can during the meeting. But it's interesting to me that that in the industrial exemption, they want to say we are under our own set of rules and regulations. However, when they really, really want to be sure, they require somebody to stamp and seal a letter. You know, I just think that's ironic that they hide behind we don't have to. But unless we really, really want to be sure, and then we want an engineer or architect to stamp it. And I just think that is I think that's the hypocrisy to some degree, and I'm not sure what that is. But anyway, I'll shut up.
Thank you for your review on that subject.
Do you not share that? If you don't, I'm going to make a motion.
Oh, I agree with you. Would you like to move on to the next case?
Sure, absolutely. The second case is 2017-07-9581, and this also deals with a professional engineer. In this case, the complainant wanted to get a written report from the respondent after respondent had done a review of supports of a porch and a foundation review for that. The respondent stated that the agreement was a verbal agreement to do this, and that he did a walkthrough and spoke with a contractor, and that was kind of the scope of work he had agreed to do. The complainant stated that she believed the written report was agreed to. So obviously I don't have a writing to look at what was paid for as far as that goes. But the respondent stated the report was only necessary because the complainant ended up firing the contractor they did the walkthrough with and got a new one. And obviously that contractor not being there wanted a written report. It did take the respondent some time to ultimately produce a report kind of as this complaint went forward, which is, you know, we want to see our engineers and respondents doing the best they can to accommodate consumers, but at the same time, I don't have anything to prove that's what he was ever paid for. So this is one of those kind of circumstances, so I felt this one was best closed. It seems like a verbal contract dispute that I think is a little bit too tenuous for this board to look into.
We have a recommendation from legal. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Case 3, 2017-080731. We have another engineer here. This was a notification from another state that an engineer had been disciplined for failing to produce professional development hours upon request. The respondent in that state paid the penalty as immediately as he received the notice, and in fact produced proof that they had actually done their development hours. But for our purposes, this registrant is actually inactive here and is not required to do PDH hours, and there wasn't a discipline of suspension or revocation. So in this case, there really wasn't, I didn't believe there was a need for this board to take any action, and it looks like that issue was addressed by the state at issue. So for that reason, I recommended closure here.
This came to our board due to a civil penalty from Indiana. Is that how it got
You have a
here?
reciprocal discipline. You could say, you know, you need to keep up with
Right.
your qualifications there. But considering we usually, in the history of this board, of what I've experienced, is we usually we're only looking at cases where we have a change in license status in another state, suspension, revocation, things like that, probation. And then we usually do likewise discipline. I haven't seen us do something where someone received a civil penalty unless we were talking about incompetency or something that was a harm to the public.
What about a letter of caution?
I think that is an absolutely appropriate action here, just to let them know that we see it. Remember, you have to report everything to us, inactive or not. Might be a good reminder.
Susan, would you like to make?
I'd like to make a motion that we advise or request our legal counsel to write a letter of caution to this legal case.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Number 4 is 2017-062461. Ricky Bursai helped me on this one. This is a complaint we received from another registrant in the community indicating that a wing of a public university appeared to be offering professional engineering services without registration. The entity itself has a subdivision that works in the public sector and with businesses in the state in order to enhance engineering experience, provide opportunities for students, but also work kind of in an educational standpoint, the development of the profession, whether that's streamlining processes and working on business models is kind of their role. Additionally, the respondent does actually have registered PEs on staff. If they do undertake projects, they will either use their on-staff PEs or they will hire part-time or volunteer PEs from the community to assist on projects with students. So I had Ricky look at it if he has anything to add, but I think we were in agreement that there did not appear to be any unlicensed activity occurring here. Recommended closure.
Okay, we have a recommendation from legal. Do we have a motion?
Moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Case number 5 is 2017-043151, and Robert Campbell was kind enough to help me on this one. This is another professional engineer. In this case, the respondent was hired to conduct an inspection of a residential footing and foundation. The complainant stated that the home was built in November 2014, but the respondent's letter signing off on the footing was not received by the city until June of 2015, after the project was complete, and as you'll note, after many requests from the complainant and ultimately the city for a letter. The home ended up having damage as it kind of settled in, and the complainant in this case believed that was related to the foundation. The complainant alleged respondent never actually visited the site since they did not actually see respondent do the work. An investigation was conducted after Robert was very helpful, looked at the case as was, and produced a very thorough list of things we need to look for to get more information. So we appreciated that, and I was able to provide that to our investigator to kind of help craft what they looked for. The home damage seems to be a result of the contractor's poor workmanship. It looked like there had been an independent review of the issues that arose, and it was determined it was a contractor workmanship issue, not related to the foundation. The respondent claims he conducted the inspection, that he did do it, is what he says, January 15th of 2015, and the scope was just to verify footing width, depth, reinforcement, and subgrade conditions. And he claimed that he found no issues. Respondent did produce only one page of notes related to the location of the home, and no pictures or measurements were provided. So what we received was a Google Maps printout, basically, of the location with the longitude and latitude, and a couple of handwritten notes. That was what we received from respondent. The complaint was reviewed by Robert Campbell, and ultimately it was difficult to determine whether the inspection occurred since it's the homeowner's word against the respondent's word. I think we all know it's difficult to prove if someone was or was not there at home construction due to subcontractors going in and out and things like that. But obviously the lack of detail in the letter that was produced and the inability of respondent to produce measurements, pictures was of concern not only to me but also clearly to Mr. Campbell, and so it brought up the question of competency. Mr. Campbell, I'll let you obviously speak to this, but one of his recommendations was to do an informal conference. So maybe we cannot prove one way or the other you actually went and did this work, but we can talk to you about this, the codes that you say were satisfied in this case. And so my recommendation here was to authorize an informal conference in order to determine the respondent's competency regarding the relevant codes, which in this case was the IRCs from 2012. If the board members determine respondent is competent or no evidence exists of a violation, this matter shall be closed upon that finding. If the board member determines a violation had occurred or that it needs to be brought before the board, we would bring it at the next meeting. Robert, I don't know if you'd like to speak about this case or if there's anything you'd like to add. I think it's one of those where the lack of evidence makes it complicated, but it leaves you with a strange feeling at the same time. So,
two or three quick things. The damage was all on the interior walls, and this was it just had a ring foundation. I mean, so all the load-bearing stuff was on the outside, and you didn't see any cracks or anything coming from exterior walls. They were all interior door frame type stuff, so that indicated that the foundation was in pretty good shape, and it was just workmanship stuff. I mean, where they got things out of kilter. What was interesting is this gentleman wrote a letter saying everything was okay, but only produced that letter after about 3 or 4 attempts, I think, from the codes department to get that letter. Typically, and I've done a few foundation inspections, we also, when we do those, we go measure rebar, make sure the spacing is good. We measure the width of the foundation, make sure that they've got adequate excavation. Check per any kind of plan, for depth. Also take pictures, with tape measures or whatever there, showing that we were actually there and we did that. I mean, that's just kind of, I thought, a standard way you do an inspection footing. He had none of that, and to come up with a letter 6 months later, that's easy enough to PDF a letter or email a letter that you've done, when somebody requests it. So it almost does lead me to believe that he just kind of made this up, but there's no proof that he did or did not. But he did reference the IRC, which I'm not anywhere near an expert in it, but he did reference that in his letter, and so I just thought it'd be interesting to ask him some questions relative to that to see if he's making that up too. So it's just weird that he wouldn't just automatically send that letter, just boom, because that's, you send that pretty quickly after you've done, or you send it to the builder so he have it in his file when they go do a closeout, whatever y'all call that, but CO. Is that what? I thought it was interesting. It didn't look like he did his thing.
Just a quick question, Robert. I noticed that in the body of the complaint that the complainant indicated that the home was built in 2014, and yet the letter was January 15th of 2015. You can crawl under a house and see the footing, but you can't see the foundation. You can't determine whether or not there's adequate spacing on the reinforcing bars or what the width or depth of that footing is, or don't know anything correct about the subgrade. I'm not. Did that?
He dated the letter as if his letter would make sense in the timeline of construction. So when they pulled the building permit, it was January. I'm gonna make up dates, but January 1st, his letter was January the 22nd or something. So it would make sense in the order of building the building, him doing in foundations. So no, he didn't date it as of the date they moved in or the date the final closeout was.
All right. The thing that was confusing is the complainant said it was completed in November of 2014.
He had it's possible he could have done this based on the timeline that was out there.
All right.
But again, we don't know.
And the lack of the lack of detail that he put in the information they provided, based on what your review was, I think should be cause for concern. And I agree with the informal hearing. I think that would be important. Regardless of what the outcome is, even if it demonstrates competence, this lack of responsiveness and documentation, I think, would at least merit a letter of caution.
He's saying that he inspected the footings prior to the concrete being poured.
Yes, sir. I mean, he's saying he did it within the normal, but
probed the trenches and all that.
Well, he didn't have any. I mean, he had basically a letter that said, "I did the footing inspection; it was good, and I did it per IRC 2012 hours." And again, okay, I got part of that, but you typically see the measurements. You typically see, like you said, maybe even a probe rod that's stuck in the grounds, or you can show a measurement. You see something, and I saw nothing. And what was interesting was it was literally 6 months or more, and the codes officials had asked for this letter at least 3 times, I think, hey, where's your letter? Where's your letter? And again, anybody that's done those, you copy them, you put them in your file, you send one to the builder immediately. You get your fee or whatever. But I mean, you do that within days of doing that footing inspection, so that he can go ahead and pour the footing and and get started on his wall without any question. And for him to wait literally almost at the end of construction before he provided that just seemed. I'm not saying he's lying, but I'm saying it's just goofy.
One other question to you, I guess, is, what you described sounds like unbalanced settlement of some kind. Yes, it's got perimeter foundations, but it should have internal piers somewhere. I mean, it's not, unless the house is 20 feet wide or something.
Yeah, it was a rancher, and it may have even been on a slab. I don't know that to be true, but I do know the load bearing stuff looked like it was on the outside, it was an outside wall. And was there somebody that inspected this, an engineer actually came in that had a pretty good report on the settling and their report, and I know that person and had done a real thorough job of analyzing it and had made that statement. So that's where I got it from. But it looked like, they had squared up door frames.
They just didn't build it right.
I mean, it's what it looked like. There was like caulking joints and stuff that were pulled apart, and I don't.
There's actually a complaint with our contractors board related to that construction, and so that's why there's actually quite flushed out information on why we have the damage. So we had I think an excellent review from a PE from I think hired on by the home warranty in their determination of what was wrong, and they even found that they needed to do something about this. So the consumer is at least getting the remedy on the house, and the contractor at issue has a complaint pending before the appropriate board. So hopefully that'll be addressed on that end for this consumer.
We have a recommendation from legal. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we follow the recommendation put forth of having an informal conference.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
I'll recuse myself from the vote because I would probably be involved in the informal. Is that correct?
If that's something you're comfortable with,
Well,
Robert, I was going to ask if anyone wanted to volunteer. Sure.
If
If anyone's
just in case I am, I will recuse
You're
myself.
volunteered.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to read the IRC a little bit better.
Yeah. I'd ask anyone who reviews a complaint to recuse, just because obviously you've seen the respondents' names and everything. So.
Since nobody else recused themselves, I guess it's you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just out of curiosity, is anyone? You don't have to. You can tell me after. If anyone just is really passionate about 2012 IRC and wants to assist, please let me know. Otherwise, then we could get that set up. Oh, Frank, huh? Okay. I don't know. Okay, number 6, 2018-001461. This is an architect this time. The complaint alleged that respondent's contracting company performed poor workmanship. They named the respondent as well, and he is a registered architect in Tennessee. Respondent's former contracting company built the home in 2007. They had a large development that ultimately, you can kind of tell by the year, that project ultimately stopped and that company dissolved kind of during the housing crisis. In 2016, he received a call from the homeowner asking him to come look at the house. When the respondent arrived at the house, he found the facade of the porch had been torn off and construction and repair work was underway. The homeowner alleged respondent's company performed poor workmanship and should pay for the repairs. Respondent was never shown the damage, never provided an estimate, never given any information, and the repairs had already begun. So at that point, no way to kind of tell what was going on. The complainant attempted to sue respondent, but the statute of limitations had run just because we're talking about 27 construction. 2016 is not the complaint. The respondent states the porches were built by a skilled subcontractor and nothing had been provided him to explain where the failure occurred. He did actually offer the homeowners a settlement to help with repair expenses because that company, the architect has created a new company and they are actively involved in that development again now that the economy has come back. So he's has multiple projects in the area and is involved heavily with the HOA there. So for reputation purposes, offered a settlement that's what he told me. Unfortunately, the complainant made a very broad allegation of workmanship against a contractor that happens to be an architect. No specifics were provided. Pictures provided show work and repair has already begun on one porch. The homeowner did claim that they are starting to see issues with a second porch, and they have not started repairs on that one. So my recommendation is actually to refer this to the contractors board and close and flag this case with the idea that the contractors board has contracted inspectors that can go and visit and do workmanship review. So we can send their expert can go out, take a look at this, decide if it's a contractor issue, and note if there's anything to do with the plans possibly. And then when they get that report and want to look at what they do, I'll stay in contact with their attorney, and if there's anything that happens to involve architecture, we can reopen this case and look at it from that perspective. But at this point, I'm not sure if there's merit here one way or the other, but if there is, it's most likely in the workmanship of a contractor rather than the architect. But I wanted to make sure that we cover our bases in case that does arise by making sure that we have the ability to come back to this complaint. So my recommendation is to close and flag.
I make the motion that we accept the recommendation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
I have a few representations for you to talk about. The first is quite an old complaint. It's 2014-004821. And this is a professional engineer. We've actually talked about it back in August, and we had a renewal application that I believe Ricky Bursai reviewed at the engineering committee at that meeting. This is a complaint that we had closed and flagged in 2015. That was due to the respondent at the time. We closed and flagged that case because he had a complaint open against him related to a lawsuit that he lost, and he had to pay. He was ordered to pay double damages to someone based on producing plans that the consumer went to court over to say that he actually didn't produce them. He just gave them to him and took money for it, but he actually didn't do any work. So basically kind of unjust enrichment sort of argument. All we received in that case was actually a copy of the judgment. We received the judgment in which the judge made pretty scathing remarks in there about the respondent and ordered them to pay $20,000 and alleged that he had been paid $10,000 and then needed to pay an additional $10,000 as punishment under the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act. When that case came to be, the board had voted to suspend the license of this person for 1 year, but the respondent never responded to any of our mailings, and ultimately their license expired. We never saw them. We could not locate them, and so we closed and flagged the case in case he ever came back so we can make sure that this was addressed. Come to the end of 2017, and our respondent is back. They applied for a renewal of their license. Our understanding is during this time they had moved to Austin P and are working in a adjunct professor status, and they weren't in the industry, which is why the license had lapsed. It's hard to tell whether that was an actual avoidance of the complaint because the license had already moved into an expired status when the complaint was being processed. So it's not like he was active and then let it go. So it's kind of hard to tell. Regardless, an application came in and Ricky Bursai reviewed it. At that meeting, they determined that regardless of this complaint, there was actually issues in the application itself that would require being addressed. So we decided to resolve this matter by just denying reapplication and closing the complaint. After that happened, this respondent again applied and obtained legal counsel in order to better go into the details of the underlying case. So I wanted to include for you, this is actually the first time we've had it, even since 2014, what at least the respondent's side of the story is in this matter. So kind of to get to the heart of what we're talking about, really, I'm going to tell you what he says about this case. I caution, from my legal standpoint, I caution trying to relitigate a case that a judge has already issued an order in, but obviously I want you to have the full picture of what the respondent says happened here. But really what we're trying to determine is whether we want this person to be able to reapply and whether they need to they still need to serve the suspension or deal with that complaint in some way before we renew their license. So with that kind of as the backdrop, this is what the respondent says happened. Respondent's application was denied at the August meeting due to lacking information, so the respondent has now reapplied. Through counsel, respondent submitted a written response to the underlying complaint that was closed and flagged. Respondent through counsel states that the person involved in the underlying judgment knew respondent through church, and in fact, respondent met this individual while he was in jail through a church connection program to kind of help folks be rehabilitated in the community, as a little more context. The individual approached him after this. They kind of developed a friendship through their church and approached him for assistance in building a mechanic shop. This is after, obviously, he was out of jail. The respondent informed the individual he could not help him, but that he could help him find an architect. Since he's an engineer, he knows people in the industry. The individual asked to hire respondent as the general contractor. Respondent is also a licensed general contractor. So the respondent said that he would assist in that capacity. An architect was hired and paid, according to the respondent, $10,000 from the individual. So the individual gave the $10,000 to respondent as the general contractor to pay a licensed architect in order to produce plans. The The architect did produce a number of drawings, and the individual requested numerous changes. They changed the scope and scale and how many bays multiple times during the project's history. Prior to the final plans being approved, the architect committed suicide. Respondent then helped work on the drafts and discussed the need for a new architect with the individual. Respondent was never paid for any services in his role as general contractor, despite there being an agreement for him to do so. At this point, according to the respondent, the individual found a cheaper general contractor and requested the $10,000 back from the respondent. The respondent stated that that wasn't money that went to him, but was rather to pay the architect for the plans that were produced. That is when the individual sued respondent for $10,000. Respondent filed a counterclaim in the action. We have a judgment on for a non-payment of the services he did render that he was never paid for. Ultimately, as you know, the result of the case, the judge threw out the counterclaim, found for the respondent, and said that no, you were unjustly enriched $10,000, and you used this other architect's plans and said they were yours, and you didn't do any of the work. Respondent states that the individual in this case has a felony conviction for fraud, and after a year of litigation, respondent chose not to appeal the decision despite not agreeing with the outcome. He said that he expresses regret that if he had understood that its impact on his PE license would be what it was, that he would have continued to fight the court action. For mitigating factors, I don't have any, really. But for aggravating factors, at the end of the day, we still have a court judgment that stands. There was no appeal found by a court to be in violation of Tennessee Consumer Protection Act in order to pay double damages due to willful misconduct. And the second was misconduct was directly related, obviously, to the registration as an engineer, taking on these plans. So I opened this for discussion. I'm sorry this is kind of a lot of information, and we've seen it many times. But this is kind of an interesting case because we have two things to consider. The first being whether, in light of the respondent's information, you believe that discipline is appropriate. And the second being whether we want to take this, in how we want to take it up. Whether we want to allow the renewal with the condition that this be served or a suspension be enforced, and whether you want to continue to deny the application based on the grounds of character. So I apologize for the complexity. But any questions you have, I'm happy to answer.
Alton.
Sarah, can you or Ricky, did you review this?
There's nothing to really, oh yeah, you had the application. I'm sorry, Ricky, that's right. But it was a while back.
I've got to just admit, I don't remember enough about reviewing this to really, I think, dig any deeper than what Sarah's put together.
Can you help me understand what, in the text of the complaint, respondent then helped work on the drafts? Help me understand that. Was he working on the actual plans and making modifications to the plans?
He claims that that he did do that. That it in a small scale helped make small adjustments while they sought a new architect based on his expertise in the area with his contractor's license and his engineering license. That is what he alleged. I do not have copies of the plans in any form at this point. They were not given to me. So much time has passed, I'm not sure anyone has them. And I have not been able to locate. We actually didn't have the complainant engaged in this one. It was provided to us by the respondent. No, how did we get the judgment? The judgment was mailed to us by somebody, but I don't believe it was actually the person involved in the lawsuit. Either it was reported and recorded and Frances found it, because she's pretty good at that, or due to it being a 2014 case, I'm not 100% sure how we received the complaint. But unfortunately, I don't have plans, and all I have is this is really just the letter from the respondent's attorney.
But he admitted
it.
in his own statement that he helped work on the drafts.
Correct.
Without a license.
Yeah, at the time he would have been a licensed engineer and a licensed contractor, but not an architect.
Did he seal? We don't know whether he sealed drawings or not.
He claims he didn't, and there was nothing in the judgment that necessarily contradicted that. But again, you're talking about a court, not an expert in this area. That may not be something they realized the significance of.
Thank you.
If I can mention, Sarah, in your description in the previous entry from August, yes, on page 6 of that, it says from 2014 that the respondent, a PE, committed misconduct by copying a set of plans not prepared by respondent and produced them as respondent's own in potential violation of it looks like the seals rule.
Correct.
So, I mean, that sounds like the respondent reproduced the set and sealed it.
I hesitate only to say this. That indented paragraph is all of the information that I have, and there's nothing in the file that actually showed this. It seemed to be a pretty cursory review by the attorneys that came before me. So they listed what I think would be the logical conclusions, just like you're making here, that this is probably something we're going to want to look into going forward, but I actually don't have evidence of that at this point. The court said that he represented them as his own, but I don't know in what way, since I have the judgment but not the record of the case. Obviously, something, if we want to move forward on this, I would like to try to get would be to see if there is a transcript available for this action.
I would agree that would be essential to the evaluation.
Sarah, did he pay the $20,000? Is there any reason to believe that he did not actually consummate the penalty?
I do not know if he has or not. I do not know.
Then I guess I'm asking you to kind of provide your opinion on this, but relative to the fact that through counsel he responded, is it your experience, how often is that done, that we actually start talking to an applicant or something and they suddenly decide that they need legal representation? Do you infer anything from that, just from your experience?
No, never. And in fact, often it's beneficial because in the end of the day, they know what I'm looking for a little more clearly.
Okay.
But I always advise never to infer anything from someone getting an attorney. And in fact, if a respondent calls me, 99% of the time, the only thing I'm going to tell them is I'd advise you get an attorney.
Is there any way he can prove that he gave the architect the $10,000?
Unlikely. But here's
He wouldn't have written a check or something?
At this point, I can try to get the underlying documents, but this kind of goes to the heart of what I want to make clear. I don't believe we should relitigate what the court has found. I think this board should accept as fact what the court found. Obviously, I'm going to defer to you on that, but how I would foresee that this would go, say, in our hearing, was I would be entering this judgment and saying, a court, you were found to be in violation of the Consumer Protection Act, and as a result, this board has jurisdiction to discipline you. I would not want to relitigate the underlying matter. So at this point, because a court has held it true, it is a fact, as far as I am concerned. Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, but he's telling us a different story now.
Yes.
If he can prove his story is more correct this time, that's one thing, but if he can't, then that just substantiates in my mind, and I'm not an attorney, so I apologize, what the court has done. And that, to me, puts on a different light with what he's asking us to do now.
Sure,
Okay.
that makes sense. I can inquire with the attorney on whether there's any additional information they're able to produce at this point. And there is also the possibility of trying to maybe seek to subpoena some of these records if we move down that road. It is possible.
I want to make sure I understood one more time about, so if the other option is fulfilling the suspension, could you just...
Sure.
The other option.
Absolutely. What I think maybe kind of to help with discussion, an appropriate avenue is assuming his application is appropriate. And really the question is, do you want to just continue to deny his application, and which would just keep this complaint closed, and then he would be out of the industry based on this judgment, based on the authority you have in statute, that Liz can expound on if it came up as an application. Or whether you want to allow the application, so staff has guidance, allow him to renew, but then I would then pretty much reopen this and go forward as if it's normal. Because at this point, all we've done is said, we're not even going to accept your application. And they're saying, can you at least do that? So we're kind of in the preliminary steps of, do we even allow the guy to renew his license? And so how I envision it is, I think it's fine either way as far as this complaint goes. I think you can continue to deny. We don't have to dig into this. I think you have the authority to do so. We talked about that the last meeting. Or would you like to go ahead and guide staff to go ahead and, if they have supplied the information that was noted as missing and that the application is complete and ready to renew, Do we approve that they approve the renewal, and then legal would start to pursue this just like anything else? And I would take the 1-year suspension and move forward as if the case was just unpaused, like a television show, honestly.
The only reason why I wanted us to consider that, kind of just based on the information that you're getting, and I'm not sure about the renewal, but at least the process can start a little bit more, if I'm understanding. I agree. I don't think we should relitigate it and try to reopen that up. But if it's kind of goes to the next step, we can get the suspension served, and maybe if it's opened up, we can make sure that the 10,000, all that
No
other
good
stuff
deed
is-
goes unpunished,
Yeah.
and this is a prime example.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what it seems
So-
like it is. But anyway.
Exactly.
We have a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we deny his application for registration.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Kathy, would you mind if I offered an amendment? I'd like also to send whatever we do to the Contractors Licensing Board.
I'll accept that amendment.
Okay, we have an amended motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? There being no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We have one opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you, members of the board. I know that was complex. I appreciate your thoughts on it. This next one is 2016-053951. This has to do with a professional engineer, and we've actually seen this one a couple times, so it may sound familiar to you at this point. In this case, this was one that started with Matt and then moved to me, where we had a professional engineer design a small student residential apartment complex. As a result, a competitor in the industry produced the plans to us and noted that they were working outside their competency area. At that time, Rick reviewed the plans and noted some deficiencies in those plans, including not including handrails on stairs and other things that stuck out pretty clearly as things that would be in the competency of an architect, but obviously not in the competency of this respondent. As this case moved forward, there was a lot of pushback. Understandably, an attorney was acquired, and that we've been kind of entering into the settlement negotiation stage of this case. And as a result, in order to expedite settlement and in order to bring around this case's resolution, the respondent asked that an informal conference be held in order to speak face-to-face with one of our architect members. As a result, in order to get a second opinion and a clear view of this board, I asked Brian Tibbs to hold an informal meeting with that respondent, which Brian did, and I obviously appreciate every time any of you take time to do that. So we were able to meet with the respondent in this case in order to have a further explanation of some of the findings that Rick noted in his review. The respondent explained that she had designed 2 identical apartment buildings within the city limits of the area she lives, and that they did not have any complaints, and that everything went smoothly. And in fact, this respondent provided a recommendation letter from the codes department for that city. However, she says in this case she stepped over into county territory, which of course initiated state fire marshal review. And as a result, she was a little, I think, taken aback is a fair way to describe the difference as far as depth of review and requirements that she was experiencing. So as a result, her plans received quite a few review notes and changes that were requested of the fire marshal's office. And the fire marshal's office did produce the form letter they normally produce for us that indicates they have someone sealing plans in multiple disciplines. You may have seen that in some of your reviews. We don't necessarily infer that they're incompetent from that letter, but it's just the fire marshal's office letting us know something, at least to be aware. Ultimately, her plans were approved. This apartment complex was built. I sought explanation of the stairs and because I think that really stuck out to me when I was reviewing it as a pretty clear issue. We've got ADA requirements, things that obviously I think our architects are going to focus on immensely and for health, safety, welfare purposes. And she explained that her original plans actually didn't call for stairs, but when she arrived on the site, this is kind of a formulaic apartment complex, the contractor had started building it at the incorrect elevation, requiring stairs later. This respondent has never worked for an architect in any capacity, but did design small metal buildings in kind of a more simplistic format, and she equated these apartments to that until obviously this project became more complex due to elevation changes. But Brian was able to, again, look at the plans again. Obviously, we've already heard some of the issues that Rick identified, but with a fresh view and at least with respondent speaking to him, I wanted Brian, if you're able to kind of speak about what you saw in the plans as well. That way we can move forward on resolving this matter as quickly as possible.
I agreed with Rick's comments. You could definitely tell the just the lack of some of the typical things that we would make sure of with the handrails and some of the other, kind of things that we would just normally just kind of pick up on our drawings. I think that as you even heard her say, it was a kind of a typical building that she thought it was just going to, that I responded with, thought it was going to be just on a site, but didn't really go to the site to review it and understand what, the different things that we architects have to make sure we look at. So I did read through again some of the fire marshals and comments, and they were, it almost seems like something was designed and then wait for the fire marshal comments to make the changes, as opposed to understanding everything that was drawn, and then so simple things is we call it a 1 hour wall, not a firewall. There's just like simple little things that we would do. So I don't know if this comes out to an opinion or not, but what I felt like is like the metal building, and it was like a builder set for you guys. Remember a builder set. You don't give up, but for like a metal building for that type of structure, probably perfectly competent, and those kind of drawings would be something that she'd probably have a lot of be able to do very well or whatever. But I think when you get into, especially that fire marshal review is necessary, and especially when you think about apartments and students' apartments, even makes me even more nervous about health safety and those type of, just anything that can happen. So I don't know how to say, maybe we, to stay in something that, maybe have a little bit more experience with, but stay away from these type of structures. Anyway, that was kind of my feeling of it. The specifics were all got in eventually, but it was more of kind of what the fire marshal said, as opposed to kind of leading it as what architects would. Yeah, that was it.
One thing I noticed Sarah said that kind of struck me was it said she had sealed multiple professions. What can you expound on that a little bit? I mean, was she competent? Did she seal electrical drawings? That's what I'm asking.
Because that was the first thing that got me, but maybe you respond back to
Sure. This is something that I know we have to talk about a lot, because I think it runs counterintuitive to how you feel the industry goes, but the law doesn't necessarily prohibit, which is kind of goes to some of the work you're doing with definitions. Obviously, there's still, I think, more things to do in our statute to make it more clear. But ultimately, the way our statute currently reads is you can stamp multiple disciplines if you are competent. And so what the fire marshal's office will often do is when they see someone who's an engineer stamp architecture plans, and then multiple disciplines of engineering even. So you've got, someone stamping electrical and sprinkler, okay, that's, are you, what a Renaissance man. Like, I'm going to write a letter and send it to the state architect board. Sometimes they're fine. Sometimes they are competent, or in many cases, you've got someone with a team, and they're, in some sort of capacity, or they have multiple registrants that are reviewing, and ultimately ends up being okay. But in some cases, like this case, you've got an engineer. Sure, I believe her history was, I don't think it's structural. I can't remember now. Was it structural? Who stamped architecture plans. Mm-hmm. They did contract out, I believe, the sprinklers ended up being sealed by a different registrant. However, you had multiple different levels of engineering, which sometimes when I have an engineer, I'm not, obviously I defer to you, but that doesn't send up a red flag immediately. But as soon as you start to see an architect stamping engineering drawings and vice versa, it's, at least at that point, that's when I need to say, if one of you all who knows this area looks at these plans, is there a health, safety, welfare problem by this person doing that? At some capacity, that there is some the statute contemplates some bleed over. The statute contemplates that at some level an architect can do a little engineering, an engineer can do a little architecture. But what the statute prohibits is when you start to do that when you shouldn't be, because you're causing a danger. And so the review that Rick did, the review that Brian did, is to ask that exact question. Do these plans on their face, as produced, indicate that the respondent underlying it is incompetent to produce plans? I put discussion here because I hadn't had a chance necessarily to talk with Brian, but my recommendation in this matter would be to continue to enforce the original discipline you approved. The only thing I would put up I would say that maybe is worth discussing would be the $6,000 penalty. We've moved around a little bit on how we do that. That was indicated at $750 a page that were stamped. That was what we originally assessed. It is my understanding, though, that respondent isn't necessarily concerned about the penalty. It's obviously the mark of incompetency, especially when a complaint's brought by a close-knit community competitor. And that is the reason that I allowed the informal conference. I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page when you did have factors like another registrant that obviously is interested in maintaining some part of the market that this person is starting to step into. I wanted to make sure that we are really looking at health, safety, welfare, and that everyone involved, respondent and otherwise, understand what we're looking at in clear detail. And having Brian there, I think, to talk with her and to indicate questions. And I think Brian did a good job of, I think we walked out of the meeting, I will give her this, we walked out of the meeting and I think that there was a greater understanding of what had happened and a greater understanding by our registrant here of why we shouldn't keep doing this, which is always important, but at this point, legally, I still think it is defensible, and the only violation I could see would be a charge of incompetence.
As I recall, last August, we were going to look into opening cases on the other two buildings that she or he designed. Is that still being pursued, or is that tabled? And I apologize because I've been gone. So.
No, it's not tabled. It's not something that I had pulled yet. I have a bigger question that I'm trying to get with the 8th floor on as far as codes goes. And so I'm trying to delicately look into the issue of if the plans are having these kinds of issues and we only know it because we've moved outside city limits, what's kind of happening on a city level. And so we haven't couched it on this respondent at this time, but that is not an issue that is being overlooked, but rather I think is moving to a bigger consideration, possibly.
I understand from my memory back then that we voted to do that. Is that not correct? To open those other cases?
I'll pull it back up. But
okay.
If that's the case, we'll make sure to pull those records and open them and add this.
I may be wrong, but that's how I remember that, because I have to recuse myself in this situation because I was asked to bring a CD, which I never looked at, to give to you all. So I know some of the other information, so I can't be in the middle, but that's what I recall on this situation.
I appreciate that. I might have missed that because we moved attorneys, so I'll make sure to pull that and make sure we do it properly.
The city official, I think, was one of the recommenders. So I think that they have a great working kind of base what I said. They, that brings it to them and give the recommendations and it gets done. So they're almost acting as part of the process. So I don't know if there are going to be any issues because it's always the city kind of helps it out based on what I understood. So anyway, I just want to bring that to attention. The city actually was one of the recommenders, one of the city officials.
The person that gave it to me is not a licensed professional. It was someone else in the community that was very concerned about what was happening. And again, I didn't look at the CD, I just passed it along. So it's not a registrant that is tattle-telling, so to speak, based on what I understood.
This may be a different complaint.
No, it's...
Because I have a filled out complaint on this one from an individual, like an identified complainant that filed an actual complaint in this case without a disc. So there is a disc case, but it is not this one. So they're factually similar, but this was actually initiated by an identifiable complainant. Like I have a witness, I have a party. So,
Mr. Bursai.
Sure.
It looks like we reached a conclusion on the complaint by assessing the penalty, and at the request of the respondent's attorney, the board looked at it again, Brian looked at it again, and he pretty much substantiated Rick's review of it and the previous decision made. So I'll make a motion that the case is not reopened and we don't reconsider the decision. And if there are problems with the other developments, those become a new complaint.
Perfect. That sounds great.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any other?
Can you restate the motion? Sorry, I just want to make sure I know exactly what we're voting on. One more time.
I make the motion that we do not reopen the case and consider the complaint, and that any investigation into other projects becomes a new complaint case.
Is there any other discussion? Okay. There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Can I ask a quick question? Is in the, do we have anything in the design, specifically stated in design guidelines or wherever, that codes officials are not responsible for the design of a, because I mean, this is a kind of a common refrain maybe in the industry. Well, the city approved it, or the county approved it, or the whoever approved it, and then when there's issues with it, oh well, it's your stamp. I mean, do we have any stamp? I'm just curious that, you know, it doesn't matter what they say, you're getting an approval from them based on a certain set of. Because it just seems that's a very common refrain I hear in the industry. Well, the so-and-so approved it, or we're going to let them review it to take care of all of our, we're going to do it really quick and try to just do it half, you know what. And I didn't know if there was something that we had written down, or if we even need something. I may be, but it just seems a common refrain in the industry. And
I've actually looked into that, Robert, because of this case, and there's kind of two ways I think that we can address it. The first is obviously under our statute, it's our registrant's responsibility to produce competent drawings. So that's I always try to at least take into consideration they were approved for the full picture of the case, and the fact that they're able to receive criticism and comment and adjust. And obviously, one of my the most important things for me to get from you all are these normal comments. You know, is it excessive? Are they designing? At this point, that still is ultimately going to be on our registrants. But on the other side of it, the codes offices themselves are also regulated in this building. The codes offices that, you know, even if they decide that the city is an independent code reviewer, they still are subject to audit every 3 years, and if there are issues, that's the bigger conversation I'd like to have here on this case is, do we need to have, you know, the fire marshal's office look into the individual codes offices that were involved here in order to ascertain whether they are overstepping the role that they're supposed to serve as far as enforcing code, not conducting design work. And at the same time, if we start to see a point where it looks like a design official is drawing designs of any kind or overstepping that bounds, you start to look like unlicensed practice depending on what that person's doing. So I think there's actually multiple avenues built in the statute where when we start to see this, especially at a large scope, we should be able to take care of it, not only internally here, but perhaps with the assistance of our 8th floor departments. So that's I had the same question you did, because I see it quite often as well. Well, you know, city approved it, so I assume I'm competent, and that's not how it's up to this board to decide what's competent. And if you don't think the city official is the speaker of competency, then it's not. So,
I think in this case it should be, or the state fire marshal's office should audit the local building department if there's that big a differential between their review and the local building department review.
That's kind of one of the conversations that I walked away from as well, that I'd like to speak with their legal counsel about what that looks like and what would trigger that. And so that'll be something I'll be addressing with them as well.
The question is more for minutes. I think you told me I needed to recuse myself, right?
Yes, please. Anytime you review, if you all would recuse.
Just make sure you guys, for the record, I did recuse myself. Okay, that was all.
Since I reviewed it first, do I need to recuse myself?
Yes, please. I know that is challenging. So Frank, if we have a hearing, you're in.
Then I recuse myself. Sorry.
We did vote on that, didn't we?
And did we have a
Been so
quorum
long
on that
ago.
vote?
Huh?
Then we have a quorum here, so the vote stands. I believe that's Robert's Rules of Order.
Robert Campbell's.
Robert. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. That concludes the legal report. And, you know, going forward, if you all have any thoughts, if there's any complaints, I know that we talked a little bit about what gets reviewed. If there's ever something you see that you really think should go to a member, please let me know. I'm happy to I'm always trying to strike a balance on efficiency, but also not losing you all, because I want you and I want your words on the record and in a hearing. So if you ever have concerns, please feel free to reach out.
I think it'd be a good time to take about a 10-minute break.
Can I say one
Is that
thing?
what you wanted to do?
That's a good idea too. But I'm just wondering if it would be okay on the legal report when you quote the case number and so forth, right under that to put board reviewer.
Perfect.
So we know whether it's been reviewed or not. Because if one that I will pay a lot more attention to one that hasn't been reviewed by a board member than I would one that has, because I know I will get a whole lot more detail from the engineering or architectural side when we get to the meeting.
I agree. I'll add
Thank
that
you.
kind of as part of our header from now on, rather than having it kind of as part of my narrative. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. King. That's a good recommendation.
Okay.
We
Let's take a
taking
break.
A 10-minute break, did
Yep.
you say? Okay. And Mr. Philip Lim did send me a note, and he will join us at 11:30. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Even that way you know who reviewed it and you can really take exception to it.
We're back. I'll turn it back over.
Okay.
Yes. We're ready.
All right, we're officially back in session here, and I believe we've come up on the director's report, if I can get my glasses out.
Oh, no, we are still on the legal section unless you'd like to move
Okay, no,
around. We can move
we don't
around
wanna
if you'd like.
skip you. We don't
We'll
wanna
continue.
I believe we've made it to the legislative update section under legal.
Yes.
And if you look on page 38 on your iPad, you've got a copy of the relevant bills that have been filed in the legislature. These two bills are very similar, and they're both sponsored by Representative Curcio. I apologize if I said his name wrong. And these bills appear to give the board authority over the QBS statute. We don't quite know how this would be administered, but if this bill is passed in the legislature, the board would have rulemaking authority if it is passed.
Does anybody have any comments? Any questions? Everybody knows exactly what it means, so. we can
This
move on.
board's very familiar. Thank you. Next, we've got the. I passed out a packet to everyone. Some of you got it yesterday. A few of you got it this morning. There's 3 documents that I paper clipped together. And the first one in the packet is what's next on the agenda, the rule amendment update. This is a rule amendment that the board has looked at a couple times before. We have narrowed down some language, and if the board would like to make any further additions to the proposed language, we can discuss that. Or if the board is ready to vote for approval, we can move forward with these rules. The engineer committee did look over the language in the second portion of this rule yesterday and had a discussion. I don't believe the architects discussed the first portion of the rule if they would like to do so at this time. I'll give the floor back to the board.
Ricky, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I can report that the engineer committee reviewed the proposed changes to Rule 120-01-.10, and we approved of those changes and recommend approval to the board.
As a reminder, this rule amendment package is a two-part. The first part is the addressing the term for architectural intern. The board had a consensus that they would like to allow these interns to be able to refer themselves as architectural associates, and that's what this rule amendment addresses. And then the second part is more focused on the engineering committee. The co-op credit language has been altered to expand the ways that an applicant can gain co-op credit, which in turn becomes part of the requirement for progressive practice of engineering. So we are expanding different means of applicants to gain this credit here.
So does this need to be broken into two? Because ours is 0201 2A is really what we are changing, and your all's is a different set. I mean, do we need to break that into two?
I don't think so.
You don't
I mean,
have to break it into two
Okay.
unless the architects don't want to move forward with this language. Since the engineering committee approved the language, if the full board approves the language in the engineering section, say that the architects don't want to move forward with their portion of the rule, we can sever this rule and just send only the engineering rule forward. But they are put on here together for convenience if both rules are approved today.
Yeah, I'd defer to Rick and Brian for concurrence, but the architectural part of this looks like what we had asked her to do, and that it reads like I would like it to read. And just looking at yours,
We're good.
I think I'm good with that too. So
We're good.
so
I'm good.
No use in splitting it up then.
We're good.
And so I think Rick, you brought up the engineering part of that, but do we have a motion for?
Well, let's make if you don't mind withdrawing your motion, and then we can just make a motion for the whole thing. Is that good? Is that
Right.
That's really
Yeah,
good? Okay.
yeah, I'll withdraw any motion I made.
All right. I would say let Alton do it, but it'll take a long time. To get that out.
Thank you.
That's all right. I'm eating Cheetos.
So I want to make a motion that we approve the changes to Rule 0120-01-.03, 1A and B, as well as Rule 0120-01-.1, 2A, 1 through 3. Entire as printed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
We'll need a roll call vote for this.
Okay. Wanda, can we have a roll call, please?
Sorry, you can do discussion if you. I just was reminding
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Susan Ballard,
Aye.
Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ricky Versailles,
Yes.
Blair Parker,
Yes.
Brian Tibbs, Rick Thompson,
Yes.
Frank Wagster,
Yes.
and Kathy Ware.
Yes.
And as a second requirement for this rule to move forward, the board will need to agree to the answers that are written in the regulatory flexibility addendum attached to this packet and the information required by the Joint Government Operations Committee. This is the same information that you received the last time I showed you a rule amendment. So I believe most everyone is familiar with it, but if you haven't got a chance to read it, and would like me to read through it, I could do that. Or if the board feels comfortable and you're familiar with the language, you could also make a motion to approve it.
I'll make a motion then to approve the regulatory flexibility addendum, as well as the additional information required by Joint Government Operations Committee that's attached to the packet.
Okay, we have a motion.
A second here.
We have a second. Any other discussion? I don't see any. All in favor say, oh, got to do a roll call on that too? Okay.
Susan Ballard,
Aye.
Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ricky Versailles,
Yes.
Blair Parker,
Yes.
Brian Tibbs, Rick Thompson,
Yes.
Frank Waxter,
Yes.
and Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Hey, Liz.
Oh, sorry. The next packet, the next document in the packet, the board has decided to move to the April meeting. So if you'll just skip that one and move to the third document in the packet that I gave you. These are the edits to the engineering reference form that the board requested from the last meeting. You'll also see a red line. Mr. Bursai had some additional edits. And the engineering committee yesterday discussed these additional edits and would like to move forward with the edits, with the red line edits in place for full board approval. And also additionally, in addition to the red line, that you'll see we are also adding boxes under number 5 to make it clear which category the reviewer is checking.
That again on number 5.
On number 5, the old form had boxes underneath the categories like above average, average, below average. They're not reflected here in this updated form. But the engineering committee wanted to move forward with the addition of putting the boxes back in and also with the red line handwritten additions.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion, although, yeah, I probably shouldn't I? I think we came from the engineering committee, but I'll go ahead and do that cleaned up. Now that you've added that other part, that was exactly what I was going to make a motion that we approve the reference form with the red line updates as well as adding boxes under question number 5 for above average, average, below average, unsatisfactory, and unknown.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Well, I guess that came. We've got one anyway. Does that require a roll call or just a? No. Okay. Is there any other discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I believe we've made it to the director's report.
We have, thank you. You have on your iPads on page 40, that is just the quick reminder that we have regarding the Southern Zone meeting. We will do that one next. The first thing that you've got for us to discuss, and it'll be brief, is the newsletter. Just a quick update. NCWS asked for just a short change that we were waiting on, so that has been updated. The newsletter is ready to go out, and so it is 22 pages long. We're going to go ahead and put it on the website, and then we've got email address. We're, if we can, we'll have conversations if we're allowed to send that to our email. If not, it'll definitely be on our website. We'll make sure you all have it to give out, and so we are changing the date from it being 2017, because so much happened at the end of 2017, to be the 2018 edition. So that is almost out the door, and I'll make sure that you all have it here in this next week, since they just went ahead and approved that piece. So that is our newsletter update. Any questions or reasons you'd want to go back through it? No? Okay. All right. Sounds good. You have then on your iPads on page 40 the quick reminder regarding the Southern Zone meeting. I believe at the October meeting, while John was still here, you all discussed a lot of travel plans, and this was definitely one of the meetings that the intent and plan was for members of the engineering committee to be able to attend this. So this is the next meeting we had where we could vote on names. The reminder is that tomorrow is the last day, so as this reminder went out also to members of NCWS, Robert Campbell was nice enough to remind me that the date was almost here and possibly considering names. So today we will need to vote on the 3 members to attend. At that point, we went back and forth with him being the senior member and not being able to attend. The starting conversation was for Ricky, Kathy, and Alton to attend, but it is at your discretion to decide. Obviously, the annual meeting is in August. If I'm still here and helping you all, and I'm with the Land Surveyors Board as well, I will definitely be able to attend that one. This particular meeting, neither Liz or I will be able to attend, so it would be just the 3 members.
Have a motion?
I have a question.
Okay.
Why is it we're just considering the three members that are funded by NCES and not members traveling with state funds?
No reason. If the board decides to vote that you want to pay for 1 member versus just the 3, I think historically, and you all can correct me, I don't know that more than 3 members have gone. You all would have to have that conversation, make that decision. I think you might have been disapproved if more were sent in the past. You all will remember that better than I would.
I think that's I don't know how many we sent down there on our original application.
I think it's been historically the 3 funded members
Well, we've sent
and others have paid.
we've sent our own funded delegates in addition to the funded NCAAS funded because they funded 1 or 2 in the past, and I think just recently they funded 3. So we have sent our own funded ones in the past.
I will say this too, that just based on my previous experience in going to these Southern delegate conferences, that most of the other states send their entire board.
And so if that's what the board would like, that's how we would vote and proceed with the justification memo to see if it is approved. I think that's the only thing we can do. That's not a problem. It would be your conversation to have and decide.
I think one of the problems, we may be getting started a little bit late with all this because if I recall the email, the 15th was the deadline for NCAAS funded, but there's a later date in February, so there may not even be time yet to go through the process for state approval.
So it's February 23rd.
Yeah.
So I don't know how quickly that can happen, but
The justification isn't quick, but the registration timeline is perfectly allowable as far as the time. We can try to have an answer if the board decides that more members or all go. We can try to have that answer sooner.
I haven't been to a Southern Zone meeting, so last year, who went to the Southern Zone meeting?
that was the one.
Is that the one? Oh.
So he kindly said that this year he was not going, I believe, so.
So what, historically, who goes? I mean, what?
I mean, historically, I think the director has gone, as well as 3 to 4 in legal, and whereas in 2, 3, 4, it just depends on where and when board meetings. So, I'm again, that's there's some good information there, but I don't know that 3 can't take care of everything needs to be taken care of. It's not that. So,
Roxanne, are you unable to go because you're doing double duty with other boards and whatnot?
Unfortunately, the timing just fell bad as we've got session wrapping up, different changes that I'll be having to implement depending on what happens with programs. So I knew the April date was just cutting it really close, and mostly because of administrative changes we make when things change from our system. So when we discussed it, it was a definite that I've already got the August date going for the annual one. I think at the annual one, at least what I've gotten out of the last 2 years I've been able to go is a lot of these things are brought back and recapped. So I am, from that perspective, hoping to not lose a lot by not being at the Southern Zone.
Okay, can I ask a question, since it's mainly an engineering thing? But the only thing we'd be adding would be Robert and Stephen.
Correct. 1 or 2.
Adding 2. I'm good with it if y'all
The Southern
are.
Zone is paying for the first three.
Right.
No,
Is Elizabeth going? I mean,
They want you there.
No, yes.
No, they said she wasn't going either.
Okay. Excuse me, I didn't refer to her by her right name. Attorney.
Roxana,
What was the question?
Roxana, I had a question
Yes.
that maybe is part of this, but you're still carrying the interim designation?
Yes.
Is there any update on that, or?
I think there is. The update that I have is that at the April meeting, Carter plans to go ahead and announce kind of the plans, and at that time, obviously, also kind of discuss the fee changes, that kind of thing. So I think by April, he definitely will announce it and possibly reach you all beforehand.
Is it the intent that the board's going to share an executive director with other boards, or is there going to be, are we going to have our own director?
I don't know that. That'll be his
And the reason
decision
I'm asking is,
ultimately, but yes.
I mean, I think it is kind of an impact to your availability, to travel, to do these kinds of things. We just kind of want to see if this is going to be incremental or is this going to be on a regular basis.
No, I get it. Travel, for what it's worth, and you all know that from Robert just having talked about the last one, it is one of those things that anytime there's an annual meeting, something that is significant, they're always going to, I think, the participation hopefully is there for legal to be able to go, the director to go. But I don't think that to the smaller regional meetings, if there is a conflict that it's that deemed that necessary, there's going to be a recap. So just from the perspective of using licensees' money, I don't know that executive directors now are encouraged to go to all of those. So whether you had a unique director just to your program or not, there's a chance that there'd be a cutback to travel. Either way, just from making sure that we're using licensees' money in the best way possible.
I don't
And
think
just
that
to
prohibits
point
you
out that it
from
wasn't
trying,
licensees'
so.
monies that was saved last time when Robert was the only one who went. That had zero bearing on the decision-making relative to the expenditure of funds.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just mentioned I don't think what Roxana said means that prohibits the board from trying to send additional members or sending legal if you'd like me to attend. We just don't know today whether or not that would be approved.
Well, I mean, again, I haven't been to Southern Zone, so I don't know exactly all the details on it, but it seems like, this board deals with things that are legal. That's what we do. I mean, it's regulations, it's rules, it's Tennessee Code annotated, et cetera, and relative to it being the state being represented and us getting good counsel in the process of discussing these
There's
issues.
actually a segment of the agenda that's specific to
Specific
legal counsel.
to, yeah. Yeah, I just can't understand why we wouldn't have legal travel. I'd be in favor of asking for it. I just don't think we ought to just roll over and say, okay, we just won't take our staff attorney with us. I think it's valuable. Now, again, I haven't been. Those of you have been, but if what you're telling me is those are the things we're talking about, and that's what this board exists for.
I think that would be something that I would encourage us to ask for, is to allow our staff attorney to go, because there is, I think it's the annual meeting that has the extra day, but I think also at the Southern Zone there are sessions that talk about future things that are going on, and nationwide what things are going on, that I know executive directors attend and attorneys also, that kind of help you all get a flavor for what's happening across the which may be a precursor to something we're going to have to deal with and help us set something up. So I think it's valuable, and I think the three of you all going with our staff attorney would be perfect. Again, I don't think that it requires the entire board to go. I think we'll be very well represented with three, but I definitely think having our attorney there would help for future stuff.
Well, if you did it all by yourself last year, the three of us plus Liz, we might be able to cover it. We might. We might be able to live up to your standards.
Let's put this. I'm no Philip Lim, but
well, no one is. No one is. But those are big shoes to fill.
We will need a motion for.
Well, I'll make a motion that we request for the additional state-funded person as our staff attorney to go to the Southern Zone meeting in Charlottesville, Virginia, as well as I think, and I don't know if we need a motion because I can't remember if it's all in the budget or not, but our three NCWS funded delegates being Ricky, Kathy, and Alton to attend as well.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
To make sure I didn't miss anything, you would not, however, be going, Mr. Campbell, or am I doing for, no? Okay, so one extra
just
and legal.
Think that I need to be there for entertainment.
Thank you. We will proceed, and as soon as I have an answer, because I think at this point, definitely, Mr. King, I'll get a hold of you, but I would make the reservations at least, and hopefully we've got an idea within the next few days. So we'll proceed. That shouldn't be a problem. Okay. You have on your iPads the budget for the 4 years to review, to kind of look at. This is on page 42. Closing year would have ended for our fiscal year June 30th, 2016, 2017. At the very bottom is the surplus of $1,957,761. You have on the second page the breakdown of the cost back, since that is something that sometimes isn't as easy to see when we review these monthly. In case you do have questions, and that's reflected on the administrative cost backs on page 42 at $209,275. I don't know that at the December meeting we discussed the difference in how legal fees are being charged. I don't think so, correct? So each program is now going to be billed for legal time, and that would be Liz, our actual attorney for the program, as well as the litigating attorney, so Sarah that looks at cases. They are now being billed on actual time spent. The allocation of legal counsel was done differently before. It was done based on number of licensees, numbers of complaints. So we may see a change in that. Obviously, for some programs, that impacts their decision to send an attorney. But there's, without a doubt, always a huge need and important reason to send the attorney. But it may be a decision to maybe not send them to every meeting. Those are the kind of things we have to weigh out, especially in this program. Is the only reason I'd say it, you have different organizations that you want them to attend. And it's being prudent with the fees that we take in and the travel and how that's viewed. And even though NCWS pays for it, we pay our fee to be part of that. So just something to keep in mind. On page 44 is kind of, again, the monthly distribution. I don't see any reasons to be concerned. If you look at November and December, our expenses, and this is on page 44, are a little bit higher and trended higher, and that's, of course, your executive director leaving, the vacation payout, all that kind of thing. I impacted those 2 months. I think that's the increase on those expenses. But otherwise, I don't see anything in particular. I think it'll be good to have the conversation in April and kind of make a decision and have different plans as you proposed, Mr. Campbell, to look at different options. So. Any questions there that hopefully I can address, and if not, I'll definitely get back to you with? Yes, and that is, let's see if I've got that on my right agenda. I don't have documents for that. I wanted us to talk about it. Let me make sure I've got a current. Here we go. Since we've covered the budget, anything on it? No questions? Okay, thank you. Regarding the April meeting, we know that we've moved a couple of things to it already. The land surveyors have the meeting date on April the 21st, I think. No, that's the zone. April 12th. So April 12th is the day that the full meeting for Thursday is on. The last meeting that we had with the land surveyors, they filled me in on what historically we've done for the engineers to come together with them the morning of that Thursday. So what we would do is Wednesday, any of the committees that need to meet, whether the architects or finance, whatever other committee, would be Wednesday afternoon. We'll send that as far in advance as possible so that Thursday morning the engineers can meet and have time then with the land surveyors. Is that historically, that was my understanding of how we have done it?
I think the last time we did it, I believe they attended the Wednesday afternoon Engineers
Oh,
Committee
okay.
meeting, correct?
Okay, so we'll leave the committee meeting alone. Thank you.
But at the same time, we'll need to have some time either Wednesday or Thursday for this discussion on the definition. So that, I mean, I don't know what works out best. It would be, if we have a joint land surveyor and then an engineering committee meeting and then try to put that on top of it, that gets to be into an 8-hour day at some point. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if we need to schedule that for, move the board meeting to 10, I don't know, or what. What architects, what works out better for you? Specifically Rick Thompson, since he's... We have done it on Wednesday afternoon, if
Okay.
that's okay. I think
Absolutely.
that's,
And I think Thursday morning, unless I'm mistaken, I'm hoping that we would still have plenty of time, hopefully, if we just leave it open for that. I think if finance is presenting the numbers, they're going to do it to the full committee anyway, so that would not take, to the full board as opposed to the committee meeting. So I think we should be okay. And then Thursday, if we run out of time, we could do a lunch break and come back and finish the meeting if that was the case. Okay? Good. I will make sure to move it that way. Thank you. On your iPads, the next item would be that was emailed to you was the proposed rule changes that we're going to delay until April. That's what it looked like. And so I've made notations of what additional options we would like to present, including reductions to educators, the 65 and older, those things, so that Mr. Huddleston can review those. And so following that is the administrative complaint report. It is redacted with complaint numbers and dates opened. I did a historical check kind of on the number of cases, and percentage-wise for this program, a good percentage of our complaints have come from these administrative open complaints that the board then looks at the number and we close. There are those letters of caution that we send out. And so I think this is probably putting us back on track. We've been opening between 8 to 10, 12 a month at the most. And I think there was just a gap of time between maybe the end of the year where those numbers had slowed down, but this looks to be accurate. And at this point, we have the entire team working on opening these, where we had just Francis doing them before. Now we've got Wanda opening them, Wanda Phillips opening them just as they come in, so we can get them moved a little bit faster and presented to you. Next, I want to update the board on our continuing education audit. I don't think we'd had a chance to discuss it in great length last time, other than I said, I knew the month that John was gone, we hadn't been able to do it. So in between our meeting in December and now, with Glenn's assistance, and we have gone through what our system can do, our core system, which is where we keep, of course, complaints, license files on all of it, and have been upgraded to a much better system without a doubt, but also one that can help us with reports. And so what we have done is we are going to automate the continuing education process so that the system kicks out an automatic report for all 4 of the professions. In the past, because it was so manual, we staggered the audit. And this time we just want to audit all 4. You may only have 2 or 3 of the interior designs versus 40 or 50 of the engineers that renewed, but it doesn't really matter that way. Their file actually has the letter already saved in it. It's one big process. It can kick out and go out almost automatically. It's still the 5%, so nothing's changing, but that report will include all 4 professions and be kind of an automatic process. So if we ever have someone leaving, it's not something we have to worry about. The system we were using was an Access database. For those of you, not to bore you, that are into computer systems, I don't even believe it's supported anymore. So it was just nicer to roll something into the case management system and the licensing system that we have. And that should go out, the first batch, and the training, and all of our staff's going to go through that, will be toward the end of this month. So we will be back on track then for the audit and get caught up. And that's the last piece that I have. So we will wait. Is Mr. Lim here?
He's here, yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Can I have a quick question before we do it?
Yes, absolutely.
The complaint report, do we vote on that?
Oh, yes, thank you, thank you. We do motion to go ahead and close
Where
all
is it?
those. It is on page 48, and there's a total of, I thought I'd counted them, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
5, 6, 7 cases. And these are the administrative ones.
Yeah, well, that's what I wasn't sure what that was. Then. Okay. So these are all administrative and requiring. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha.
Page 48 doesn't have much on it.
That's it. That's just the list.
The tablet right at the top, that is it. All cases
Interesting.
open between the 19th and the 25th of January.
Now I got it.
Yeah. Oh, it was loading.
And we have to vote on this, huh?
We'll need a
Chairman.
motion to close them, I believe, is the process.
We have a motion. Rick?
Oh, I had a question on page 44, but if we got a motion, I can ask it after that.
Well, I make a motion that we close the administrative complaints listed on page 48.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion?
I will have one bullet. Can we add on to that just some verbiage like administrative complaint report? These are opened by the admin from admin and whatever our other language we had in there before, just so we know what we're looking at. Again, it.
Any other discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just one question, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. On page 40, 44, 48, I'm sorry that I didn't ask this before. I don't, on the surplus deficit AE revenues, on the green, the state, is that registration fee on that third item that's downward trending?
It is. We are charged a certain amount for each renewed and new license issued out, so we pay that back to the state.
Okay, so that's our,
Yes,
back to them.
that's
Okay,
correct.
yeah.
That's correct, yes.
Just given that we're cutting fees
Gotcha.
or
Yeah, we can't
registration.
touch that one.
No,
Okay,
I
yes.
I'm just hoping we could get there. Never mind.
Yes, you
Thank
got it. Thank you.
The civil penalties that are assessed, do they go into the general fund?
The civil penalties are tracked separately from the revenues, but they stay within each program. So your civil penalties do stay with you, yes. It's a good question. You're welcome.
Okay, moving on, engineering report. Ricky?
The engineering committee met yesterday afternoon, and we've covered most of the topics, the rule change and the statutory change that we're not proceeding with, the joint meeting about the definitions and the reference form. We've already acted on those. Other than that, we reviewed applications and questions about applications and audits. And the other item that I have is that we did receive a legal opinion that associate members can help the voting members review applications. And I don't think we settled totally on how that would be done, but we've got that concept there, and there were a couple of example ways that can happen. So that was the progress to report. End of my report, unless somebody has anything else.
Thank you. We'll move on to the architectural report.
Yes, we met this morning, and basically we had 3 applications to review, questions, and we acted on those 3. I don't believe there was any new business. Am I correct? And that's it. It's very quick and to the point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. New business. We have election of officers.
I am.
Chair of that committee?
Yeah, I apparently
Okay.
have been reappointed to that. So,
Are you now the head guy?
I'm the end guy now. Previously, what we have done is this opens up the nomination period of time. We don't have any nominations currently. Historically, what we have done, in all fairness to the professions, is that we have rotated the chairmanship from an architect to an engineer to what we would call an other, no offense, to an interior designer or a landscape architect or even a public member. So those disciplines, because as we roll on and off the board, the criteria for being on the board long enough to chair takes its impact here and there. So I believe we're rolling into the landscape this coming year, but there's nothing in stone now, Blair. But anyway, so this meeting is to put it on the table that it's time for nominations. We will, at our next meeting, I believe, receive the nominations. No, and then we typically vote for that June transfer. That's correct. Liz, is that right? Yeah. The timing.
I believe so.
Yeah. When this announcement today is just that we are open for nominations. So think about who you want to nominate, and if you want to nominate yourself, please feel free.
Is there a formal process for making the nomination?
On the floor so far, I mean, I can't imagine why you couldn't do it in writing. That's just historically how we've done it.
I think, and again, this is going back 5 or 6 years, that the nominating committee may have recommended a slate of officers. And I know some of that was based on the transitional protocols. Can the committee come up with a recommendation?
Well, we will make a recommendation, but we don't want to make a recommendation until all of nominations are made.
Okay.
I mean, you know, if everybody nominates someone else, then we've got a bigger decision to make than how our protocol has been previously. If the slate is as on some boards moving up the ladder, if you will. But yes, we'll take any nominations, and our committee will make recommendation to the full board.
And what all officers? Chair, vice. What all officers? Secretary, chair, vice chair. Just those three. Okay.
Yeah, all officers will be nominated.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my report.
Turn. First of all, thank you all for the cards and letters in the death of my mother, and that's why I was not here in December. So it's good to be back. And I'm going to report on the CIDQ meeting, which is our credentialing board for interior design. We met in Alexandria, Virginia, and it was a beautiful, lovely, historical place to go walk and explore. We had a full delegation there. I think there were 1 or 2 delegates from a couple of states that couldn't make it. And we did a lot of housekeeping with bylaws, updating and taking care of business in that respect. We had 3 wonderful speakers at our meetings. One of them was Designer of the Year from Gensler, who I believe is actually an architect, but practices interior design. The second one was a Utah State Senator and a Minority Whip. And then the third is Dale Atkinson, who is the Executive Director and General Counsel of FARB, F-A-R-B, which is the Federation of Boards. And NCARB actually recommended that CIDQ join this organization so that as things are changing within the country, we're all, have an information bank that we can work together on. So all the speakers were very good, and it was definitely a good meeting to attend. Each year they seem to be getting better, and so glad we were able to do that. The other exciting news is our national conference is going to be in Nashville in November, so we get to host that. So I've got another little thing on my plate to help with. So we will be able to show them the Southern hospitality that we're so noted for. And so we're going to have about 75 people here attending our conference. So I have notified ASID and IIDA that we need to be getting our committees together and planning good trips and tours. The meeting is going to be at the Hutton Hotel down on Broadway, so that will not be far away. So happy to get to show everybody our neck of the woods. Also, I have an announcement that the University of Tennessee in Knoxville is celebrating its 100th year for the interior design program. So that's huge in our industry to have had a program that's existed that long. And we were in home economics, then human ecology, and we've been in architecture for about 15 years now. So that's been a great transition for the profession. And so the celebration is March 24th, and so we are asking everyone to please tell your design staff. If we're a graduate of UT, you can look it up on the website and find it on my Facebook page about the celebration. And we've got a speaker and tours and things like that. So that is going to be, I hope, a great day for the program. I have a personal announcement. ASID selected me as one of the 4 candidates to be sent to Malaysia and Singapore to visit the International Furniture Conferences there. During that 5 days, we'll be going between the 2 cities, but the 10 days prior to that, I'm going to be in China, Hong Kong anyway, so I'm going to be in 4 countries on 10 flights in 15 days. So y'all pray for me, because when I went to Italy last year, they lost my luggage the entire trip, so I'm not checking a bag. So anyway, outside of that, the only other question I had was there any updates on the special grant program, because it's time for them to present their findings and results from the special grant program. So any questions? Good to see everybody again. So.
I don't have an update on the grant, but thank you for letting me know so I can follow up and make sure that
they
we have
had 18 months initially to do the program, and it's probably time for them to come tell us about it. So,
Any other new business? We've got one big, okay.
I just wanted to ask what the latest was on the public member.
read my mind. That's what I was reading. So we have, yesterday actually, the appointment papers came through to me. So we have our new public member, Grant Allen Minchew, Minchew. Our website updating, as I mentioned to a couple of you, has changed, so I wasn't able to add him myself, but by Monday he'll be added to the website. This came yesterday as I was at the Legislative Plaza, so I've not looked and have no other details on him. He wasn't able, of course, with 1 day notice to join us today, or he would have been here. But his papers got signed yesterday. His effective date doesn't start till February 18th, so I don't even know that he could have. But the great thing is we've got a member. My understanding is he's fantastic, so I am very excited. We've communicated. His date is already blocked for the April meeting, so he will be joining us then. So, good. Yes.
On that, go ahead.
My follow-up question is relative to the next engineering member.
So I'm actually thrilled we've got this, because being in touch with so many programs, we are really lagging behind on appointments. So the bad news is I don't have that particular position filled yet. But hopefully, just getting one, and I think last week we had one for another program that had been waiting for about 8-9 months. So hopefully by April we'll have that position filled as well. That's my hope. We keep encouraging and reminding, but it was thrilling to see one yesterday.
Any other new business? Well, in that case, I'd like to ask Philip Lim to come forward.
Somebody needs to take a picture for the website this time.
Philip, just from your memory, what's the answer to question number 14 on the law and rules exam?
Question number 14, I don't know. You listen to me. Can I shake hands with this new guy here?
Hey, buddy. How are you, Philip? Good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Hey, so you're going to get the picture? Great.
Got a couple coming.
West Tennessee's name? That's right. Hey, I can go to Singapore, you know.
Can you?
Yeah, and you should take him.
Yeah, I would take him.
Yeah, well, you should go.
Hot shot.
They can't even find it. So anyway, first of all, we're giving you this.
This is spelled correctly, though. It's spelled one hand. It's spelled correctly. It's double LB, you know. My brother who does the
Official.
It really would be funnier with a stool.
Don't you think?
Oh, no.
There you go. All right, one of those ought to be good.
K.S. Lim. Philip
pointing when
Okay. The board does hereby.
First of all, I want to hear this and honor to be on. Forget the people who actually mentor me. Always tells Mr. Philip. So I'll leave my whole life in the season. Or the Asian redneck. So.
And that would be a life of service.
Recycle. Do we have to send that? All right. Better give it to him.
Everybody's on my
I'll leave down. Thank you. Sorry, you got what stuff?
Hey, buddy. Look.
Cheer there, Robert.
Yeah, I'll get you a frame, brother.
I'll be loving.
Yeah. Ricky's gonna buy your breakfast. We never talked about this, did we?
I heard there was no other.
I've got one quick
new
comment. Quick
Okay.
comment on this.
Yes, please.
And I don't know if this is the right format or not, but we received something on our QBS website language Did that get sent out, I think?
Yes, that is actually posted on the website. I
Okay.
emailed all the board members. It's that paragraph. The way the website does already include it. The minute I emailed you all was the last minute I had with the webmaster, and so I said, if you can post it, I'm emailing it now, so it's there. We're probably also going to just add a link at a front page in case people don't go down. It's under news and information, and it's just that quick blurb that you all have. So that's what Ms. Martin put together.
I have one question on QBS. It's a legal question. Is there any repercussion to a registrant who is the entity that requests of engineers who are registrants to violate the QBS law?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
If a PE, on behalf of who they work for, sends out the request to other PEs to submit price proposals in violation of QBS, is that registrant in violation of any existing rule? Is there any repercussion to them?
I think I understand your question, that the person who is making the request on behalf of the county or municipality or the state is himself or herself a PE. And your question, I think, is if they made that request on behalf of the county, municipality, et cetera, and that was in violation of the QBS statute to other architects and engineers, would that individual be subject to, I'm assuming, your current rule of...
Yeah, I'm talking about the individual. Yeah.
I'd have to look at that. I'd have to look at the language of the rule that we currently have and see which party it's addressing. If it's addressing all architects and engineers and persons under your licensure that are part of that, or is it addressing a specific person? Meaning, is it someone who submits, or is it someone who makes a request? So, I have it. I could look at your rule right here.
Angle I hadn't thought about.
Neither had I, and somebody asked me the other day, and I said, oh, I'll ask while I go to the meeting.
Any other comments?
And I almost forgot.
There being none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think he's looking for my answer. Hang on just a second. He said he might be able to answer it. Sorry.
And looking at the rule, my answer to your question would be no, because a rule only talks about a registrant who submits information.
Appreciate that. That was really good on the fly. Thank you.
Thank you. It took me a while to look for it.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let's go. That was unrehearsed. Threw you a curve.
There are some